A Maiden's Unwanted Heroic Tale. Volume 2. The Inviter. By Hifumi Shiguro. Translated by Hecate Honryu at Hecate's Corner. Audiobook by Masquerade at Masquerade Audiobooks. Chapter 25. Magic and Kisses. It has been approximately 2 months since they returned home. Although Bogan has not returned yet, life in the estate is back to normal. Kreschenta and Berry cleaned the estate, tended to the garden, cooked and prepared the bath. The only difference is that Kreschenta has grown even more attached to Berry. Kreschenta has become more honest and reliant on Berry. Today, Kreschenta and Berry are spending their time in the kitchen again. It broke. The teapot's magic crystal is not working. Berry had been about to brew tea after baking cookies. She removed the magic crystal installed in the base of the teapot and squinted at it. Magic crystals are engraved with magic circuits by injecting mana into them. Various effects can be achieved depending on the circuit engraved. This magic crystal had been engraved with the circuit for heat, but residue mana has built up in the circuit after repeated use, deforming the circuit and rendering it useless. Once this happens, the circuit has been recarved. Berry sighed. The usual method of repairing magic crystals is to go to magic technicians, who make a living carving magic circuits into magic crystals. But Berry has the knowledge and technique required to repair relatively simple magic crystals by herself. I will fix it when I'm free, Berry thought as she poured the water from the teapot into a pot when Kreschenta suddenly muttered. Magic crystals are easy to use, but since they break, they are a little inconvenient. Well, all tools are like that. I will fix it later. Then let Kreschenta. Kreschenta thought of an idea recently. Kreschenta extended a finger towards the pot. Berry tilted her head in question, then was stunned by Krish's idea. Berry saw pale blue mana gathering around Krish's finger. The mana extended from her finger towards the pot and enveloping it. Then the mana itself formed a magic circuit, bringing the water to a boil in a short span of time. Kreschenta had turned lukewarm water into boiling water. Kreschenta had always found it a little weird that everyone uses magic crystals. Why not just create a circuit in the floofy thing? Kreschenta spoke as she made the water boil just by pointing at it, failing to notice Berry's reaction. Magic crystals are formed when mana crystallizes underground. These crystals are used as a medium for magic because of their stability, ease of processing and ability to absorb mana. Heat, cool, start a fire, create water, provide light. Just about all magic uses magic crystals as a medium, and that is the norm in this world. Excluding magic that acts on the caster's own body, magic cannot be used without magic crystals. That is the consensus among magicians. Magic technicians carve circuits in magic crystals while magicians develop and refine those circuits. In this world, magicians are magic crystal researchers and technicians. The magician's rod that many magicians wield are equipped with magic crystals, and that is how some magicians shoot light bullets or manipulate fire. But that magic is merely a means of self-defense and requires magic crystals. Multiple magic crystals are required to use different magics, and they can be difficult to carry since complicated circuits would require larger magic crystals. This is the reason why there are hardly any fairytale magicians on the battlefield. Excluding physical enchantment, almost all magic is used for peaceful purposes. Not just that, by doing this, Kreschenta waved her right index finger and created flames in the air while spinning her left index finger and making a stream of water from the pot dance like a snake. By reproducing the circuits carved in the magic crystals with our own floof, magic crystals are not needed. This makes cooking more convenient. Cooking. Yes. There were a lot of inconveniences on the battlefield, so this can be used when cooking outdoors. It can also be used for cleaning and laundry. Berry could only stare at this new theory of magic before her very eyes. Even for Berry, who has studied magic more than the average person, this is completely unknown. Many magicians are searching for ways to use magic without magic crystals, but none of them have achieved anything practical. At most, there is a method using pure silver in place of magic crystals, but Berry had never heard of anyone using magic completely empty-handed like Kreschenta. Berry could understand the theory, and with enough effort and practice, she could probably achieve the same thing. Instead of creating a set mold and injecting mana into it, build the circuit in your own mana. It is a difficult technique on the level of drawing a picture on the surface of water, but with the correct method it is possible. Krish's discovery is revolutionary. One day, it might become the standard way to use magic throughout the world. Berry was surprised at first, seeing the pipe dream described in many grimoires, the completed version of it, right before her eyes, then felt fear silently creep up on her. The objectives of that pipe dream is far from peaceful. If magicians were able to freely use magic anywhere and everywhere on the battlefield, for example, magicians would become a force to be reckoned with. Many grimoires describe how magicians could change the fundamental concepts of war if they were able to easily and flexibly manipulate the elements wherever they were. This could hail the beginning of an age where magicians are more than mere researchers. The majority of magicians are nobles and are treated better than commoners, but they are still close to the bottom of the ladder. Many magicians are second or third sons who had no other career choices. Those that play an active role on the battlefield receive the greatest honors in high society, so magicians are not treated well and some even looked down on them. This treatment and oppression led to such fantasies. Krish's idea will have too large of an impact on them. Based on Krish's words, Berry is the first Krisjay has shown this to. Berry was relieved by that for now. Berry, it is nothing. I was just a little too surprised. This might be very convenient indeed. Berry gently patted Krish's head, sealing her surprise and fear deep in her heart. Krisjay smiled as she always did when patted on the head. Krisjay herself did not see this as a big deal. She had simply demonstrated something she had thought of to cheer Berry up because Berry had sighed. It is not very difficult for Krisjay, and she also believes Berry can do it since Berry is good at manipulating mana. Krisjay is simply grateful for Berry's goodwill and feels she could never completely repay Berry. Krisjay has no hesitation about sharing such techniques to cheer Berry up. Krisjay puts a lot more weight on the cooking that she learns from Berry. Compared to that, this is nothing. Berry understood Krish's simple desire to cheer her up. That is why Berry was not sure what to say. Krish's idea is meant for the cooking that she loves. Although Krisjay might be abnormal, the purpose of this idea is peaceful. She has grown to be a kind girl at heart. That is why Berry did not want Krish's idea to create unnecessary tragedies. What does Krishsama think about war? Think. Does Krishsama like it? Hate it? Then, hate. Krisjay tilted her head in confusion about the question's intent, but still answered instantly. Berry nodded in agreement. I hate it too. The principle of war is simple. Let us say there is an apple and Krishsama wants to eat it, then one more person, someone else had the same thought. If both of you want to take the apple for yourselves, Krishsama will end up fighting with that person. Berry took out an apple from a basket, placing it on a cutting board. Krisjay watched her with serious eyes. Even if Krishsama restrained yourself and thought to share, if the other person still says he wants to eat the whole apple, you will still end up fighting. Does Krishsama understand? Yes. The apple is an example. It could be territory, people, or technology. It could even be the idea that Krishsama has just showed me. Krish's idea. Berry nodded as Krisjay created a small flame at the tip of her finger and showed it to Berry. Krishsama's idea is something nobody else has thought of. It is an amazing discovery. Just as Krishsama said, it can be used for many things, but if it is turned on people, it could easily be used for war. Ah, that is, right. Krisjay somewhat understand what Berry wants to say. People who want to know Krish's idea would try to steal it from Krisjay, right? Yes. Krisjay nodded then replied. Then how about just telling everyone? It does not get reduced like the apple, so everyone can share. Krisjay knows that Berry is a kind person, so she can roughly predict the answers that Berry wants. It will be troublesome, but Krisjay is willing to do it if it is Berry's wish. That is a wonderful thought. But even if Krishsama tries to teach many people, there is a limit. There is no way to teach everyone in the world, and even if Krishsama told the people Krishsama has taught to spread it, it will definitely stop somewhere. Why? Let us say there is an empty-handed opponent in front of Krishsama. Krishsama must fight with that person. Although that person has not noticed, there is a sword at his feet. Will Krishsama tell him that? I see. Krisjay nodded in understanding. Technology that can be used for war is similar. Even other technology that are just convenient are also like that. It is better to monopolize it and keep it from your enemies. That is the normal way of thinking. And, back to the apple example. Apple? Yes. When there is a battle, the strong always wins. But if the weak that always had the apple stolen from them suddenly obtained the power to defeat the strong, they would want to get revenge. Kreschenta's idea has the power to turn the weak into the strong, so it would not be good to spread it. As Kreschenta listened to Berry talk so seriously, she gradually grew more anxious. Berry did not look happy at all. Then, Krish's idea is bad. No. It is definitely not Kreschenta's fault nor am I saying that the idea is bad. But I am a little scared that it will lead to unnecessary conflict. Berry embraced Kreschenta and gently patted her head. Kreschenta wants to make daily life more convenient. But there are people that think differently and will use technology for bad things. People that like fighting will not use this technique for cooking or laundry, they will use it for war. That is a very sad thing, so I do not want to see it happen. Kreschenta hates war and I do not want Kreschenta's idea to lead to it. So I want Kreschenta to keep it a secret between us. Secret? Yes. I believe that Kreschenta's idea is a wonderful thing. I would like to try using it to do various things. But if what I said comes to pass, I would be very sad, so I want to keep it as a secret between the both of us only. Okay. Then Celine too? Oju-sama, as well. Of course the secret is not absolute, just as much as possible but… Kreschenta nodded. Kreschenta will not do anything that makes Berry sad. Thank you. Thank you for listening to my selfish request. Kreschenta is always making selfish requests of Berry. After saying that, Kreschenta nervously asked another question. Berry, do you hate Kreschenta now? Fufu, that will not happen. I love Kreschenta. Kreschenta wants Berry to tell Kreschenta if Berry does not like something or is angry. It is okay. Why would I dislike it or get angry when the Kreschenta I love is trying to make me happy? Like I said, personally I am very happy that Kreschenta taught me this. It is very interesting and exciting. Kreschenta sighed in relief and smiled happily, then tiptoed a little to press her lips to Berry's. Berry stiffened for an instant, but Kreschenta did not notice. Her expression was full of bliss. Kreschenta also loves Berry. It is mutual. Why, yeah. Berry's face was bright red and troubled after the kiss, her eyes wandering around awkwardly. It is her fault, but she is still not used to it. The mouth-to-mouth candy from Kreschenta when she came home. That was the beginning of it all. Kreschenta had seen her parents kiss a lot. Berry and Celine also kiss her cheek and forehead occasionally, so Kreschenta saw kissing as something normal between people who are close. That is why she had no qualms about that mouth-to-mouth transfer. Berry felt that this was dangerous and taught Kreschenta about kisses. But since Berry focused on making it comprehensible for Kreschenta, it became a long-winded and roundabout explanation, taking a long time to explain to Kreschenta that kissing is an expression of love done between two people who love each other. Part of the cause is also that Berry herself was slightly embarrassed by the explanation. No, that was the problem, Berry realized. Berry reminded herself that she had left out the obvious part that kissing is normally done between those of opposite sex and also made the mistake of implying that Krish's kiss was a bad thing. Kreschenta saw her relationship with Berry as two people with strong goodwill for each other, meaning they love each other. So when Berry implied that Krish's kiss was a bad thing, Kirsch had asked if Berry did not like Kreschenta. Berry had desperately denied it and was looking for a better explanation when Kreschenta anxiously asked why Berry explained it like that, whether Berry did not like kissing Kreschenta. Berry was not able to hold out. Berry had hastily replied, "Oh, Oju-sama and the coachman were there, so, it was not that I did not like it, it is just not good to do it in such a place." Kreschenta had asked repeatedly, "Really?" Berry does not hate kissing Kreschenta, and when Berry nodded, Kreschenta kissed Berry again in relief. And that was the beginning. After that Kreschenta became a kissing fiend and kissed whenever she felt uneasy or happy. Kreschenta had not properly understood the explanation that kissing is an expression of love, seeing it as an appealing method for displaying goodwill. Kreschenta had learnt from Berry and Grace that loving each other is a good thing. So Kreschenta naturally thought expressing love is also a good thing. Whenever she has the chance, she puts this good thing into practice with Berry and Celine. Both Berry and Celine were unable to deny her pure innocence to her face, and it dragged out to this point without them being able to correct her. It was all they could do to make her promise to only do it with the two of them and not when there are other people around. Berry also has to listen to Celine's complaints about this every day. Kreschenta looked up at Berry expectantly. Berry's face was bright red as she embraced Kreschenta even tighter and patted her head, regretting that unrecoverable mistake. Even as Berry repeated to herself that there is no strange meaning behind it, seeing Kreschenta smile so happily when she is kissed also makes Berry happy. Berry tried to convince herself that the fact that Kreschenta is able to express her emotions like others is something to celebrate, definitely not a bad thing, but Berry's conscience tormented her. We ended up talking a while. Back to what we were doing, let's return to your room after brewing tea. Okay. Berry shook her head clear of those thoughts, averting her eyes from the problem. Berry is too sweet on Kreschenta and the problem is growing worse day by day, but she is already in a state of resignation. Chapter 26, Ceremony. Kreschenta was in her room, reading a storybook lying open in her lap. Krish's latest favorite pastime is relaxing on the soft sofa with Berry and drinking tea while Berry reads children books to her with occasional explanations. Berry recommended children books because they have simple depictions of love and happiness, concepts that Kreschenta has trouble understanding. But these interested Kreschenta more than Berry had expected, mainly because Kreschenta could stick close to Berry during the story. Kreschenta is already partly dependent on Berry by this point, clinging to her all the time. Reading together is time when they are naturally closer together, and Berry pats Krish's head as she teaches Kreschenta various things, all good things for Kreschenta. Although Kreschenta focuses more on being pampered by Berry than the contents of the story, this study method is not that bad. Kreschenta is gradually learning to understand normal feelings from the books. And with this, the knight and princess lived together happily ever after. Together, does that mean they got married? Yes. That should be the correct interpretation. Getting married is happiness. It is written like that in a lot of books. That is difficult to say. But if they love each other, then getting married is a happy thing. Love each other, Berry responded to her own words and hastily continued. Kreschenta, you know that marriage is only between a man and woman, right? Yes, Kreschenta knows that too. Kreschenta taught Kreschenta that before. Kreschenta seemed confused why Berry would point that out, but Berry breathed a sigh of relief. Berry would not be able to bear it if Kreschenta said, then Kreschenta wants to marry Berry. To Berry, Kreschenta is cute and pure, a simply adorable existence. Berry would definitely feel the urge to hug her tight and impulsively say me too, even though she knows that would make things worse. Berry cleared her throat and recovered to her serious teaching expression. Marriage itself is a contract to become husband and wife. It is just a contract to become family and have children. But it is also a vow to raise children together, to spend your lives together, so marriage would be happiness for people who love each other. My sister's marriage with Master was like that and they were very happy. Kreschenta and Tusama also seemed very happy. Kreschenta recalled Grace and Gorka. Berry smiled in response. That is nice. Marriage for nobles are usually to form connections between houses, so I cannot say that marriage itself leads to happiness. But it is also true that it can lead to happiness. Even if the husband and wife did not love each other at first, there are cases where their relationship developed after their marriage and they found happiness. After some thought, Kreschenta asked, will Berry get married one day? No. My body is weak and I cannot bear children. Childbirth is very difficult. My house is also ruined, so there will not be that type of proposals either. Berry's body is weak. Yes, well, as Kreschenta can see, I am healthy now, but when I was a child I could not go outside, I could only stay indoors and read. So I was a little weird. Berry laughed softly. I cannot tell what Ojusama is thinking, I was often told this. The same at Kreschenta. Berry too. Yes, I was a little different from others. So although I cannot completely understand how Kreschenta feels, I believe I can understand it a little. Berry stroked Krish's soft hair as she spoke. Even when I tried to be considerate, I got things completely wrong. That happened a lot. Maybe it is because of that, whenever I see Kreschenta confused by such things, it feels like watching my past self. Empathy? Yes, Fufu, indeed, empathy. Berry smiled happily and stroked Krish's cheek. I try to act positive and likable, but I am actually not very good at talking to others. I am the only servant in this large estate because my Naysama and master knew about this. Berry shut the book and took a sip of tea. I am not as good at talking to others as Kreschenta thinks I am. I am only good at acting. I still have the same weakness as Kreschenta, I just live by hiding it. So with this included, marriage would be difficult. Also, I am already very happy to live here, in this estate with Kreschenta, Ojusama, and master. I see. Kreschenta also took a sip of tea. Kreschenta roughly understands how marriage works and she was happy about this. If Berry got married, she would leave this house and Kreschenta would not be able to follow her. So if she is not going to get married, that is great for Kreschenta. Kreschenta adjusted her position in Berry's lap and wrapped her arms around Berry's neck. Then, Berry will always be with Kreschenta. And lightly kissed her. Why, yeah, always. Berry looked troubled, her face burning as she embraced Kreschenta. Kreschenta smiled and closed her eyes. Kreschenta has grown a bit too beautiful for such actions to be childish. It might have been okay if she was still a child, but Kreschenta is already becoming a beautiful woman. When she and Berry, who also has very feminine curves and young, pretty looks, hug each other, it looks indecent. At some point, the door had opened and Celine was peeking in, sighing at the indecent pair. Oh, Ojusama, when did you? Berry, no, never mind, I don't care anymore. Please, try not to lead Kreschenta down any weird paths. I will not. Kreschenta had been about to doze off in Berry's arms, but raised her head at Celine's voice, tilting it in confusion at Celine's look of resignation and Berry's slight panic. Celine, did something happen? A letter from Ojusama. Seems like the two of us are summoned to the palace for our distinguished service in the war. You've heard that the war ended just the other day, right? Yes. Kreschenta too? Kreschenta turned to stare at Berry. They had just come back. Kreschenta is still getting her fill of being pampered by Berry and cooking every day, if possible. She did not want to go. Berry guessed Krish's thoughts and looked at Celine hesitatingly while patting Krish's head. Like I said before, Kreschenta played a large part. Such service cannot just be ignored, so both of us will be receiving the rank of senior knight, medals, and a reward. Senior knight all of a sudden? That is. Knights are a rank of nobility in the kingdom, but it cannot be inherited nor are they granted any land. It is more of an honorary title. But this rank is only granted for achievements on the battlefield. It is not something even greater nobles can obtain through their birth alone. The title of knight is split into senior and junior knight. Those granted this rank usually start from junior knight and after earning enough achievements, are promoted to senior knight. But in cases like this, where their achievements are exceptional, they can skip straight to senior knight. I was also a little surprised that we will be senior knights. Well, with the situation being what it was, it is effectively thanks to Ojusama that the country is saved. That should be the reason behind their generosity. I see, it is surprising. But, then Kreschenta really has no choice but to go. Berry had heard from Celine about what had happened on the battlefield. Krish's explanation was simply, Kreschenta helped build a fort and fought a little. But Kreschenta was the one that suggested the plan to steal back the initiative and break the northern stalemate created by the enemy. She had also built a fort that served as a solid defensive position of the river and racked up many kills herself. Even just hearing this short summary of Krish's exploits, it is no wonder she is receiving decorations. Berry is also happy for her, but Berry could not fully celebrate it. Being granted a title for your achievements is an indication of expectations of further contributions. Expectations of contributions on the battlefield. Celine let out a small sigh as Berry lowered her eyes. I know how you feel, but we can't decline, so just accept it. Yes. I am aware, but, well, once that is over, we just need to show up a little at a dinner party. How about coming along if you are so worried? Berry too. Krish's eyes lit up. Celine put a hand to her head, then turned to Berry. Seeing how attached Kreschenta has been to Berry lately has made Celine experience heartburn and want to puke sugar. Berry smiled wryly at Kreschenta, then nodded after some thought. Okay. There should not be any problems if I come along as an attendant. I think it should be fine for you to wear a dress though. Even if your house is ruined, your rank has not been revoked. Yes. But I do not have good memories from that. Berry's tone was self-mocking. That was none of my business. Sorry. It is okay. Thank you for the concern. Kreschenta was listening to that exchange with a question mark floating above her head, so Celine explained to her. Berry's Argan family technically still exists. So even though she is working as our servant, Berry is also a noble like us. She's also so pretty. If Berry felt like it, she could put on some makeup, wear a dress and proposals will come flooding in. That is an exaggeration. Oju-sama, calling me pretty in front of Kreschenta is embarrassing. Berry embraced Kreschenta and said, but like I told Kreschenta earlier, my happiness right now is living here. I do not particularly want to revive my house or find a partner. I am happy like this. Fine. Celine sounded a little disappointed but turned to Kreschenta. Kreschenta was hugging Berry and enjoying her warmth. Celine pinched her cheek. Furine. Most of all, the problem is you, Kreschenta. Since you have to participate, you will have to study etiquette. Fufu, no need to worry, Kreschenta is quick to learn so she will pick it up in no time. I will also be staying by her side. Well, that's true. Just need to make sure this girl does not get caught up in anything weird. Furine, Ihai. Celine giggled as she stretched Krish's cheek once more before releasing it. Kreschenta pouted, sulking as she rubbed her cheek, then turned to bury her face in Berry's bust. Berry smiled wryly as she combed her fingers through Krish's hair. Oju-sama really likes teasing Kreschenta. Celine bullies Kreschenta. Kreschenta is too cute, so Oju-sama cannot help but tease you. Lately Kreschenta has been with me all the time too. Oju-sama also wants some attention. I see. Hey, stop teaching Kreschenta stupid things. She is already a little bit of an idiot. Kreschenta pulled Celine into the hug and smiled. Kreschenta can also pamper Celine. I am not at an age for that. Celine looked disgruntled, but her cheeks were flushed. Though she complained that her clothes would get wrinkled, she did not resist. Kreschenta will make what Celine wants to eat for dinner today. How about beef stew and hamburger steak? Ah, apple pie would be good too. Now that you mention it, we have not made apple pie in a while. Let's have that today. Seriously. Kreschenta will make a delicious one. Kreschenta pecked Celine on the lips, making Celine's face turn bright red as she glared at Berry. Berry scratched her cheek awkwardly as she averted her eyes. Although there were slight problems in their life in the estate, it was a comfortable life. Chapter 27, Dress Dilemma. Cute. Half a month later. Kreschenta is dressed in pale blue and Berry is staring at her with a dazed look on her face. 10 days until they depart for the capital. They face a problem with the victory ceremony coming up next month. Krish's dress. Unlike Celine, Kreschenta had no plans of showing her face in high society, so she still does not own a single dress. The Kreschenta family is wealthy, but Bogan does not spend unnecessarily. He decided to put it off until Krish's growth stopped. Of course he did order a few casual one-piece dresses for her which can be used for greeting guests, but such simple clothes are not suitable for a dinner party at the palace. So they sent for the tailor and ordered a dress for Kreschenta urgently. Like Bogan, Kreschenta also dislikes unnecessary expenditure, cooking-related things are excluded, and had proposed altering Celine's dress from last year since it fits her, but Celine and Berry opposed this. Many nobles pay attention to minute details. The younger sister wearing a hand-me-down from the older sister would not be good for their reputation. Especially since Kreschenta is a margrave of the kingdom and upper-class noble. Krish's growth seems to have stopped, so Berry and Celine decided to take this chance to make 2-3 dresses for her, asking the impossible of their usual tailor. The tailor readily agreed. The tailor had visited them multiple times and was infatuated with Kreschenta. He makes repeated offers to make a dress for Kreschenta every time he has the chance. Large amethyst eyes, clear skin, long and fine silver hair. Krish's fairy-like appearance seems to have been great inspiration for the tailor. When he received the commission and came to take measurements, he brought along countless rough sketches of the many ideas he had already thought of for Kreschenta. It took half a day to choose 3 from those. Berry had explained that they only needed one by the deadline, but the tailor must have been really motivated. The tailor finished the 3 dresses with 10 days to spare and has come to the estate today to present them. The first is a simple white dress bordered with black and has a red rose at the chest. The second is black emphasized with red, creating a calm but vibrant look. The third is pale blue, a dress that gives the image of purity. Despite the bold off-shoulder design and large slit in the back, the pale blue color made it look chaste. Coupled with the opera gloves that reach past her elbows, it made her look sophisticated. Compared to how many of the current dresses expose the chest and emphasize the breasts to create a sexy look, this dress is chaste to the point of looking plain. This dress definitely would not suit most, but the pure look fit Krish's fairy-like charm extremely well. Do I look good? Yes, very good. You are very pretty, Kreschenta. It really fits you. I see. Kreschenta smiled as she felt the dress fabric. As long as you take care of your clothes and wear them neatly, anything can look relatively good. Kreschenta had grown up in a village without many things, and that was what Grace had taught her, so Kreschenta had never felt like spending money on clothes. But she does enjoy wearing pretty and comfortable clothes. Being praised for looking good also makes her happy. Berry, Celine, and the tailor all seemed delighted and praised Kreschenta, so Kreschenta did not feel any dissatisfaction with becoming a dress-up doll. I had always thought that this color would be perfect for Kreschenta, and it seems my judgment was correct. It must be her silver hair. Match it with pale blue cloth and she really looks like a fairy from a story. Yes, wonderful work. Thank you so much for finishing 3 dresses so quickly despite the sudden request. No, do not mention it. In fact, please let me thank you. As an artisan, it was like a dream when I heard I could make clothing for Kreschenta Ojusama. The tailor, a man dressed in a suit, looked over Kreschenta once again and nodded. Seems like there are no problems. When you need another dress, please call for me. Not just for Ojusama's dresses, but if there is an opportunity, I would love to make a dress for Argan-sama too. Fufu, if that time comes, please do. Thank you very much. Yes, then please excuse me. Kreschenta and Celine also said their thanks as Berry sent him off. Including Berry, all of them are nobles and the tailor is a commoner. Although the Kreschenta family only grew large recently, they are indisputably upper-class nobles. There is no need for them to thank commoners. It is natural for nobles to receive the services of commoners. The payment is simply business. In fact, it is normal for nobles to consider thanking commoners insulting, but Bogan and the 3 of them do not care about that at all. They treat commoners politely despite being nobles. The Kreschenta family is a family of humble heroes. Their attitude is well liked by the town people and is also why the tailor was willing to work day and night to create 3 wonderful dresses. Kreschenta and Berry are often seen going to the trouble of visiting stores themselves to do their shopping. Because of Krish's appearance and how often she appears in public, in a certain sense she is more popular than Celine among the town people. That is why to the tailor, it was a genuine honor to make a dress for her. Mew, feels like I lost. You seem very popular. Hi. Celine accurately picked up on that and pinched Krish's cheek, sulking a little. Celine is no less beautiful than Kreschenta, but her dignified beauty and the strong light in her eyes gives the opposite impression from Krish's ephemeral beauty, a powerful kind of beauty. Throughout history it is the frail and adorable types that are fawned over. Krish's appearance will make most people want to protect her, giving her an edge over Celine. Kreschenta is aware that her appearance is good, but that is it. She does not feel anything in particular about it, nor does she care. Celine knows there is no point getting competitive with Kreschenta, but it still annoyed her. Celine satisfied herself by pinching and toying with both of Krish's cheeks. But it really does suit you. You look lovely. Really? Celine is dressed as normal, in a simple, white one-piece dress. Celine dug through her memories, considering which of her dresses would match Krish's when something soft touched her lips, making her stiffen. Celine is always pretty. Kreschenta smiled as she told Celine that showing no qualms about the kiss. Krish's kissing habits are only getting worse. Celine thought of saying something about it, but she is also too soft on Kreschenta, unable to say anything harsh. Jeeks again. Celine let go of Krish's cheek and sighed, turning to the other two dresses lying on the bed. The current dress looks good, but the other two are also hard to give up on. Celine would prefer the red and black dress, but it seems like Berry has taken a liking to this dress. This will be an intense battle again, Celine thought as she remembered their dispute the day they had seen the rough sketches. The tailor had brought too many rough sketches, and Kreschenta took no initiative to choose. So the task of choosing the dress naturally fell to Celine and Berry, but Celine prefers elegance and style while Berry prefers cuteness and purity. They could only choose 3 from dozens of rough sketches. The result was a heated argument lasting half the day. Kreschenta brewed tea while Berry was busy arguing and watched them with the tailor. The tailor was also listening to their argument intently, taking notes. They skipped lunch. Of course, there were no snacks either. The fight continued until Kreschenta lost to her hunger and tearfully asked if they could prepare dinner. Celine dreaded another similar battle. But Celine cannot lose. Celine had given in the previous time and Berry chose 2 dresses. Celine is determined to get this black and red dress through this time. This dress is the one that was originally meant to be rushed in time for the dinner party. The door opened and Berry entered, staring at Kreschenta with a raptured look. It really is cute. Oju-sama, this has to be the one. Wait a moment. I will admit it is very cute, but Kreschenta is a general's daughter and will be going to the capital to be granted the rank of senior knight. Krish's personality is childish enough. She should at least appear smarter with this black dress. That makes sense, but Kreschenta is a child. There is no need for her to act older. And the victory ceremony is to be conducted in military dress attire, right? Then I believe it is fine for the dress to be the cute one here. Berry had a smile on her face, but her eyes were not smiling. Celine also smiled as she countered. Hey, Berry. Don't you remember that I gave in last time? I let you choose that pale blue dress and white dress already. Gave in. Did Oju-sama forget that we let Kreschenta choose whether she preferred red or white? We decided on white because Kreschenta said she liked it. It is just that as a result, Kreschenta chose the one I wanted. Oju-sama did not give in. That's because you asked her that way. I remember that you threatened her by saying, Kreschenta, don't you think this white dress is better? We cannot prepare dinner unless we decide. You coward. Oh my, that is saying too much. Then the white one is fine. Kreschenta could not endure her hunger any longer and just said that. Kreschenta stood around helplessly as the two of them suddenly started arguing, then recalled what had happened the other day. She took off the gloves to avoid dirtying them and reached for the cookies. Survival instinct. Krish's brilliant mind has calculated that the chances of skipping lunch is high, so she decided she had to make up for it with cookies. But Celine caught her hand. After using such a cowardly move, if you still refuse to bend, then I will have to crush you thoroughly. Kreschenta, change into the black dress again. Okay. Even if you do that, my decision will not change. Why are you talking like you have the right to decide? Why? It is obvious. I am Kreschenta's teacher and caretaker. It is my role to choose her dress. That's self-proclaimed. If you are using that, then you are a servant and I am the next master. Know your place. And the battle begun. If she stays quiet, Kreschenta looks mature despite her adorable appearance. This is because she does not show her emotions and is expressionless most of the time. The black-red dress has more exposure than the pale blue dress and it emphasizes Krish's modest breasts, but the gap with her young appearance creates a sexual charm. Her young appearance and adult expression are both brought out well by the red in the black dress, making her look stylish and beautiful. This is the only dress that can fully bring out Krish's charm. The pale blue dress is certainly cute. It suits her very well. Only Kreschenta could wear it so well. But since she is going to the capital to receive the rank of senior knight, she should wear this vibrant black and red dress. Was Celine's argument. Kreschenta was nodding at Celine's praise of her, but Berry disapproved. I can understand Oju-sama's opinion. But but accepting the other party's views but showing no sign of backing off. Berry made Kreschenta change into the white dress. The white dress looked even more pure than the pale blue dress, but the black accent also made it look stylish. The red rose at the chest stood out, a point of vibrancy in an otherwise simple outfit. Berry argued that Krish's true charm is in her innocence, and if Kreschenta needs to be stylish, this dress would be a good compromise. It is true that the cool, sexy black and red dress also suits Kirsch well. But since Kreschenta is not looking for a partner, that dress would be unsuitable. It might be okay if Kreschenta is good at deflecting men, but she is not and is quite shy. We should emphasize the adorable general's daughter side of her. That's just your taste. You're overprotective. She needs the experience. It is not just my tastes. This is for Kreschenta's sake. Kreschenta, there will be a lot of dishes at the dinner party. Would you want your meal to be interrupted? No. This black dress will make a lot of men come talk to you, giving you no time to eat. So this time, let's go with either the white or pale blue dress. Higher. Celine pulled Kreschenta away as she was about to be ensnared by Berry. Berry, that's cowardly. Kreschenta, you would not give in to food during such an important event, right? Kreschenta is a splendid lady, right? Yes. The dinner party is a social gathering among nobles. Even though there is food, you cannot be eating the entire time. In fact, you will be thought of as an embarrassing and greedy girl if you do not restrain yourself. Do you want to be seen that way? Kreschenta does not. That's right, rather than glutton Kreschenta prefers Lady Kreschenta, right? Then you must not listen to Berry's stupid words. Oh my, Berry frowned. Stupid. Even if our opinions differ, Ojusama resorts to insults. That's because you tried to ensnare Kreschenta with cowardly method. Not just once but twice. Those methods will not work every time. Ensnare is such an exaggeration. I am simply offering my opinions for Kreschenta to consider when choosing her dress. Kreschenta, you poor thing, it is okay. Even if Kreschenta is a glutton, I love Kreschenta and everyone will think it is cute. It is a dinner party in the royal palace. There will be many dishes Kreschenta has never seen before. Do you want to enjoy those dishes with me? Food. Celine appealed to her reason. Berry appealed to her desires. This match was already more of who can convince Kreschenta rather than choosing the dress. Noon had already passed. It is the usual time for tea time. What are you arguing about? Oh my, master, welcome home. About 2.5 hours after the sun was at the highest point in the sky, Bogan came in. Bogan had finally finished cleaning up after the war and had come home yesterday. He had left early this morning to participate in a meeting regarding the army's reorganization, but when he came home after finishing his work for the day, he had heard noisy voices from Krish's room. He recalled that the dresses were to be delivered today and came to take a look, only to walk in on Celine and Berry's argument. He stopped them and listened to what each had to say. Either one is fine, he thought as he felt the fatigue weighing down his tired body grow heavier. Is my opinion, master. Berry just won't listen. Doesn't Otusama also think that this black dress is nicer? Anyway, I understand both of your views, but calm down first. It was a pointless argument, but Bogan felt relieved by it. He had been fighting with honor and lives on the line. He felt the tension from that heavy responsibility relax. He is home now. His stern features relaxed. After Kreschenta had come, the two of them had become a little noisier, but it is a good change. Celine had been too serious after he had lost his wife and now she had mellowed a little. Berry also seems to be enjoying herself more than before. The person being fought over is uncomfortably glancing between the two of them, looking to Bogan for help. Seems like Kreschenta is just a dress-up doll here. Bogan smiled wryly and compared the two dresses, then answered. Military dress is the standard for a victory ceremony, but there is no problems with women wearing dresses. Can't she just wear that black dress for the victory ceremony then wear Berry's one for the dinner party? Cham. Really? Yeah. You should also wear a dress. It will be a hot topic if both of you wear dresses. There are already songs of you two on the battlefield. Songs? Berry tilted her head in question as Celine blushed. The heroes protecting the two beautiful Kreschenta princesses throw yourselves into the whirlwind of battle. Two beautiful princesses dance for us. The twin eagles share a pair of wings, guiding us through the storm. What was the rest? I don't remember, but it's a song about Celine and Kreschenta. Oh my, there was such a song. Oju-sama, why did you not tell me about this? There's no way I could. That's too embarrassing. Bogan laughed. It's a good thing. You know that many commanders wish for the love of their soldiers, but not many can obtain it. On the battlefield, this is something to celebrate. On the battlefield. Bogan saw Berry lower her eyes a little. I know that Berry still cannot accept it, but that is true. But I can understand. Kreschenta helped us a lot. Without her, the kingdom would still be at war. Of course, I will do the most that I can, but I am not the hero that the public thinks I am. I have limits. Having her at my back at those times is most reassuring. Please understand this. Yes. Celine clenched her fist as she watched Berry nod, then glanced towards Kreschenta. Kreschenta was staring at the cookies with stiff expression. Her limit must be close after skipping lunch. Then, are we done, choosing the dress? Yes. If Oju-sama agrees. Well, fine. I will accept this. Kreschenta breathed a sigh of relief at finally being released and took off her gloves. She can finally eat the cookies. But a voice stopped her. Oh yeah. Celine, once Kreschenta is done changing, bring her to my room. I need to quickly run through the ceremony procedures with you too. I will be going to Kokis Estate tonight, so I don't have much time. Okay, Oju-sama. Kreschenta froze. Chapter 28, Journey Memories. Stretch out your leg and take a large step. Repeat that 300 times and it is 1 league. Walking at a normal pace, you can cover 8 leagues in an hour, so traveling on foot, you can cover 70 to 80 leagues in a day. Ancient Japanese League, ranging from 533.5 meters to 655 meters. The Kreschenta estate is located in Gurgen, roughly 600 leagues from the capital, Albanarea. Since they are traveling by carriage and horseback, there is no one on foot. They travel slightly faster than the average traveler and can cover close to 90 leagues a day if they wished to. But that does not mean their journey becomes any shorter. This is because towns along the main road are generally located about 60 to 80 leagues apart. If they camped outside every night, they could reach the capital in 6 days. But that is assuming they bring along all the necessary food and horse feed. They would need an extra carriage for that and even more feed for the extra horse, leading to greater expense. Thus there is a need for them to stop by towns for food and to feed the horses, but while they restock, the sun would set. So whether they camped or stayed at an inn, they would spend the night in town either way, so the length of their journey is not much different from going on foot. Even if the distance is the same, if there are 9 towns on the journey, then it will take 10 days either way. If there are 8 towns, then 9 days. A day's journey, whether on foot or horse, often refers to the short distance between towns. In contrast, an army marches through mountains, forests, and empty plains, so their day's journey is often a little longer, but the distance covered in a day is also ambiguous. The distance that can be covered each day is approximated from where the traveler can rest, so people usually estimate the distance by feel, and the length of journeys are described in days instead of distance. Kreschenta, look, those are the twin mountains. It is the 3rd day of their journey. Kreschenta and Berry huddled together in the carriage, watching the scenery through a small window. Celine, Bogan, and Gallen are outside on horseback, riding together with the guards, so the 2 of them are alone in the carriage. Berry is dressed in her usual white and black apron dress. Kreschenta is wearing a white one-piece dress under a black hooded cloak with silver embroidery. Krish's previous cloak was stained with too much blood and had to be thrown away. This new cloak was chosen for her by Celine and is her latest favorite because of how comfortable and warm it is. Kreschenta played with the fabric as she responded to Berry. Mitzgronia and Bernaic, right? Yes. They each have their own names but are usually referred to as the Twin Mountains. See how their shapes are very similar. Just like twins. South of Gurgen, 2 steep mountains blocked the path to the capital. The mountains are said to have been split into 2 by a battle between dragons. Mitsgronia and Bernaic, the two twin mountains also known as the Dragon's Moor. The two mountains separate the center from the north. They are the border between Curiel and Alkiel. In between the two mountains there is a gently sloping path that a carriage can just fit through, serving as the only trade route between the center and the north. 500 years ago, the area north of here, basically the area around Gurgen, belonged to barbarians, and these mountains were the border of the kingdom. Naturally, this was a key location for both the barbarians and the kingdom, not that the kingdom was much different from the barbarians at that time, and many fierce battles were fought over it. Vast amounts of blood has seeped into the ground of this strategic location. Thus many soldiers follow tradition and call them the Dragon's Moor. Because of the griffins, savage flying beasts tamed by the barbarians, the kingdom suffered greatly on this land. Mitsgronia and Bernaic are the two heroes that finally captured the mountains. Their names often appears in books. The northern barbarians of that time were split into many clans. Bernaic infiltrated them alone, obtained the aid of the powerful clans, and attacked the Griffin clans from behind. Mitsgronia took that chance to lead a large force into the mountains. Many men were lost, but they broke through to the north and captured the Dragon's Moor. They then constructed a stronghold on the north side, cementing their victory at the Dragon's Moor. When it is already 500 years ago, the history in books could be fabricated, and Kreschenta hates reading those. Kreschenta judged that most of those are fiction, but there is one interesting exception, the Battle of Dragon's Moor. There are many records of it, and it is often brought up in books that Kreschenta has read. The clans that cooperated with Bernaic went through a period of strife and formed the Arna Empire to the north of the kingdom, while the defeated barbarians scattered to the northeastern and northwestern mountains. Thus the mountain clans do not have a good relationship with the kingdom and the empire, but they still honor the old non-aggression pact, so peace continues. The battle was described as necessary to protect the peace of the kingdom, not an invasion. But Kreschenta could tell that it was definitely an invasion to expand the kingdom's territories. It is doubtful if the multiple supposed invasions by the barbarians even happened. History is decorated and affected by perspective. Political fronts are recorded as if they are facts. History books are not always right. But among such cases, the Battle of Dragon's Moor is quite interesting because it can be confirmed in many books. Kreschenta absent-mindedly stared at the mountains with Berry, thinking about how she would go about it. Kreschenta has knowledge of this area's map, but it is the first time she has seen it herself. Accurate maps are valuable, and even then, there are often large differences with what she actually sees. If Kreschenta was to deploy an army here, how would Kreschenta arrange them? How would Kreschenta build a fort? Kreschenta stared at Berry as she imagined that. Fufu, are you sleepy? No. Kreschenta looks at the scenery so that she can imagine such things. She memorizes the scenery and imagines how she would deploy troops against a potential enemy in various conditions. By imagining these, she can be ready to deal with anything that happens and also pass the time. Kreschenta does not have the habit of enjoying the scenery. Trees are trees, flowers are flowers. At night, the stars will show and the moon will shine. These do not bring out any particular emotion in Kreschenta. She simply sees and analyses what there is. She has never felt joy from looking at the scenery. But Kreschenta found it curious that Berry seemed to be enjoying the act of watching the scenery itself. Berry had told Kreschenta to ask anything that she found weird, but even Kreschenta was reluctant to ask what is fun about that, when someone is enjoying themselves. For Kreschenta, as long as Berry is happy, that is fine. Berry pointed at this and that from the scenery outside the small window. Today's evening sun is beautiful. The flower patch over there was very pretty. Kreschenta nodded as Berry spoke, but did not feel what Berry seemed to be feeling. Ask me if there is anything you find weird, Kreschenta. Berry laughed softly as she stroked Krish's cheek. Berry had noticed that Kreschenta had a question, but Kreschenta did not ask it no matter how long she waited. Normally, Kreschenta would ask immediately, but this time, Kreschenta only stared at Berry curiously and did not ask anything. Berry thought about why and finally realized Kreschenta was being considerate, so she urged Kreschenta herself. Berry was overjoyed by Krish's kindness and embraced her tightly. I do not have the habit of enjoying the scenery either. Well, the mountains feel large and I think the flowers are pretty, but that is it. Really? Yes, I am enjoying watching the scenery together with Kreschenta. With Kreschenta. Berry nodded and looked outside. Kreschenta, do you remember the roast bird we made? The one the three of us stuffed together. Yes, it was very delicious. Did you have fun making it? A lot. It was fun. Celine was very bad at it. Berry held up a finger as Kreschenta nodded honestly. That is it. Fun memories are also fun when you recall them. Just like now, I am enjoying the act of making memories with Kreschenta by watching the scenery together from this carriage. Making memories. Yes. That previous memory was very fun because we cooked together. Right now, I am also together with Kreschenta, so I am having fun. And when I remember this, I will enjoy it again. Kreschenta could kind of understand, but also could not. Berry smiled as Kreschenta groaned with difficult expression. I am happy simply by spending time with Kreschenta. It is fun whether we are watching the scenery or doing something else. Even if it is boring to watch the scenery alone, if I am with Kreschenta, then it is very fun. I see. Berry patted Krish's head, her eyes gazing into the distance. In the past, I also traveled this road in a carriage, with my Kreschenta. At that time, I did not have the leisure to look at the scenery, much less enjoy it like I am doing now. Does that? Fufu, of course it was not because I did not like Kreschenta. Berry's arms tightened around Kreschenta as she spoke. It was almost 20 years ago. My father's business failed and the Argan house was under heavy debt. My father did his best, but collapsed from illness after pushing himself too far. Kreschenta and I were left alone and there was nothing we could do about the debt. The merchant that lent the Argan house money told us to participate in a ball at the capital. Ball. Yes. There are many types of people in the capital. To some of them, the Argan house's debt is trivial. We were told to become the mistress of such people, a common story for powerless nobles. There are many who want noble status. Berry was told to become someone's wife. Berry nodded. The correct way to put it would be selling herself into bondage. They would be lucky if they were chosen by someone who valued them for their noble status. Many nobles are beautiful. There are those that buy ruined ladies and widows to fulfill their carnal desires. The two of them were sent to an infamous ball where such people gathered. Berry was not even 10 yet. At that time she was sickly and underdeveloped, basically a child, but she was still made to participate in the ball because she would be popular among certain people. There is no slavery in the kingdom, but there are people who are effectively slaves. In the end, the two of them were sent to the capital as slaves. Since we were supposed to become someone's mistress in exchange for money, we had no say no matter what kind of person it would be. It was a very difficult time for us. They were made to wear vulgar dresses to be toys for the men's viewing pleasure. Berry was smart and could understand her situation. She had given up and prepared to become a toy for her sister's sake. But her sister was a kind sister. She convinced Berry to stay back, covered for her and protected her from the hands of the men there. Berry's sister spent the night with a few of those men. That was when we coincidentally met Master again and he found out about our situation. He took Kreschenta as his wife and saved me. That was the first time Berry's sister cried throughout that ordeal. Berry had been happy, but also resented him for not saving them earlier. But later, she found out that Bogan had sold many valuables, including family treasures, for them and grew ashamed of herself. Bogan had only met Berry's sister a few times when she was younger. But Bogan was not put off by her sister's experience and said she was the most wonderful and beautiful woman he had met. He was the only one suitable for her sister. Part of why I said marriage would be difficult for me is because it reminds me of unpleasant memories from that time. Honestly, even now I am still scared of men and do not like wearing dresses. I was also a little scared of boarding this carriage to the capital. Kreschenta patted Berry on the head, looking at her worriedly. Berry smiled brightly in reply. But since I am together with Kreschenta, I am enjoying myself and am very happy. The scenery outside the window looks different from before and is very beautiful. This is all thanks to Kreschenta. Kreschenta did not do anything. Basically, just being by Kreschenta's side makes me happy enough to forget the painful things. Berry laughed and smiled gently. Krish's gaze wandered awkwardly, Then she buried her face into Berry's chest. She then raised her face a little and said shyly, Krish also, does not really like carriages, because it hurts Krish's butt, but Berry prepared a blanket and hugs Krish like this, so it is not painful and is comfortable, and Krish is happy. Berry widened her eyes, then smiled happily. Foo-foo, I see. I guess I cannot stop hugging you then. Not liking carriages was an extremely important secret for Krish, but as she had expected, Berry is kind and did not make fun of her. Krish was delighted by that and embraced Berry, kissing her. Berry realized what was about to happen from their position and the position of Krish's face and tried to stop her, but Krish is one of humanity's best at stealing lips. Berry's reaction was just too slow. You too, it's almost lunch. Celine opened the small window right at that moment, peeking in from atop her horse and froze. Krish drew away, satisfied. Berry's face turned bright red as she looked at Celine. Hey, in the carriage. Celine hastily looked around and breathed a sigh of relief after confirming there was nobody around. What'll you do if someone saw, you idiot? You. Celine stifled scolding and hand came through the window, pinching Krish's cheek. Chapter 29, Unpleasant. Soon after passing through the Dragon's Maw they arrived at Mitskronisha. This fort was named after the hero Mitskronia and was originally built to defend against the northern barbarians, but it is now a key trading hub connecting the kingdom's center to the north. The Dragon's Maw is flanked by mountains, the ground is steep and footing is unstable. It is natural for many merchants and travelers take a break at Mitskronisha, and eventually people started settling there, so the fortress Mitskronisha became a large trading town. Trade from the Northern Kingdom and Ana Empire passed through here before being distributed to the south. The market here is famous for its vibrancy with streets packed with shops and open-air stalls. This town had established a free market district to stimulate the economy. Anyone could trade tax-free just by setting up a stall in this district. This district expanded as the town developed and is now a 2-square league area packed with stalls. Since they had arrived early, Berry brought Krish and Celine to the market, accompanied by 3 soldiers. Krish was in a good mood with her arm entwined with Berry's as she looked around excitedly. There are many ingredients that she had never seen back at the estate, so many novelties. Celine had also started learning to cook recently and they chatted as they explored the market. Here, Berry, Krish-sama, okay, thank you. Berry had bought Krish some fruits and snacks. Krish fed Berry a small fruit and ate one herself. The small fruit is a Nirkana fruit, a fruit similar to strawberries but sugary sweet. Krish's lips relaxed into a smile as she enjoyed the taste. It is gluttonous and embarrassing to be the only one eating. So Krish usually fed Berry before eating herself. But this is not in their estate. Berry's face was bright red as Krish fed her in public. Although she is their servant, Berry is also a proper noble. Eating while walking is already embarrassing enough for her. Being fed by Krish makes it even more so. Berry herself also enjoys feeding Krish and does it often, but that is in the estate. Berry was educated as a noble and shares their values. Although she does not prejudice against the commoners eating on the streets, it is very embarrassing to do it herself. But she is unable to tell Krish that when Krish looks so happy. Krish grew up in a village and it was normal to pluck fruits and just eat them on the spot. Giving each other food like this was an everyday thing. Since Berry knows their sense of values are completely different, it is hard for her to say anything. Nobles' values are not necessarily more correct than others. Berry has no intentions of raising Krish to be a proper noble, she just wants Krish to be happy. As a result, this thinking limited Berry's actions and the embarrassing act continued. Ahihi, delicious. Why, yes. Celine too, here, it is delicious. I will refrain. I won't be able to eat dinner otherwise. Celine's attire is a white shirt and black riding pants that flare out at the thighs. It matches Krish's black cloak with silver embroidery. Celine had given up on the scene next to her, but adamantly refused Krish's innocent offer herself. Accepting such an offer on the street would be embarrassing. Even if she might accept it indoors, where it has already become a habit as of late, she has no interest in being publicly humiliated. Celine's eyes seemed to say you deserve it as she looked at Berry. That's why I told you to stop. This was clearly going to happen. Why, yes, but I cannot help it. This is because you're always doing these kind of things. I'm not helping you. It is the result of her own actions, so Berry could not protest. She had a feeling this would happen when she had bought the fruits for Kreschenta. But Berry is too soft on Kreschenta. She had lost to Krish's silent plea combined with upturned eyes and bought fruits they could eat while walking around. Berry blushed from both embarrassment and happiness, but did not stop Kreschenta. Her arm is tightly entwined with Krish's, but leaving Kreschenta free enough to hold the fruits. Celine smiled wryly as she watched them walk together happily. The three of them with their beautiful appearances drew a lot of attention. The market is crowded and not a very safe place. There were some that looked at them with ill intent, but the lightning and falcon crest stopped them. Unlike simple bandits that attack any passing carriage, thieves that lurk in towns are wiser. They know very well what will happen if they do anything to those girls. Lower-ranked noble daughters are often the targets for kidnappings. Kidnapping them is like kidnapping any other girl in town. Once the kidnapping is accomplished, things will work out somehow. But daughters of powerful nobles are different. Such nobles will do everything they can to find the culprit, even if they had to look through every piece of hay in the haystack. The country will also take action. Such crimes are seen as a rebellion against authority that was granted by the absolute ruler, the king. The culprits must be caught and punished in the most cruel way to set an example. Such punishments also extends to anyone associated, whether or not the person is actually involved. Anyone suspected will be taken in and anyone that belongs to the same group will be executed. Basically, every single person involved in any shady dealings in the vicinity is included. In the past, a royal relative was kidnapped and a third of the citizens in the town where the incident occurred was executed. Similar hunts were carried out in neighboring areas and anyone who ever interacted with the guilty group was executed, including merchants and lower-ranking nobles. This is how heavy the punishment is for such a crime. The syndicates in towns are well aware of this. All members, even the lowest ranks, are strictly controlled. People like these are in a sense a necessary evil, so they are overlooked in order to maintain a certain level of order. Since there will always be criminals, a system is necessary to keep them under control. But this is just an unspoken agreement. There is a need to show that the kingdom is merely overlooking their presence, so when such crimes occur, the crackdown is excessively severe. This is the reason why, though there are still kidnappings and ransom of merchants, no nobles have been kidnapped in the past few decades, at least not officially. Because of these circumstances, the three of them were not exposed to any danger and their day passed peaceful. The sun will be setting soon. Normally, travelers will stay at an inn when stopping by a town. But not every town has a high-class inn suitable for the Kreistands, high-class nobles, and a general. Nobles have a status to uphold, and unless they are traveling incognito, upper-class nobles traveling for official duties must not stay at an inn meant for normal travelers. They have a reputation to maintain. Bogan was born as a lower-ranking noble and has spent a long time on the battlefield. A bed and a roof above his head is sufficient for him. He might find it ridiculous, but there is an unspoken agreement in the kingdom that nobles must act as befitting of their rank. Even if he personally finds it ridiculous, if he stayed at an inn, other nobles would shun him for insulting nobles as a whole. If the town they visit is nothing more than a rest stop and there is no suitable inn, then they would have to set up a tent and camp outside. It is stupid, but this is the norm in the kingdom. Nobles are somewhat protected from crime, but they are bound by such troublesome traditions to maintain their image. But this is a problem shared by all nobles. So there is also an unspoken agreement that nobles should welcome and provide lodgings to other nobles traveling on official duties. The country also approves of this. There are 5 main roads leading to the capital, known as the King's Fingers. The towns and territories along these roads generate a lot of income and the nobles that manage them benefit from this. The kingdom allows them to earn more than the other territories so that they can host nobles traveling on official duties. They have to provide lodgings and luxurious meals for visiting nobles. Of course this costs money, and with many nobles passing through, the expense becomes quite significant. The unspoken agreement was formed naturally over time, and there have been nobles that went bankrupt because of it, so the nobles that manage these territories are granted a greater share of the taxes compared to other territories. This road is one of the king's fingers, and the large town of Mitskrenesha is also managed by such a noble. Since the hero, Bogan Kreschenta, is visiting, he must be welcomed. They were granted a magnificent estate to stay in. The Kreschenta estate is not that small, but this is twice as large. The walls are smooth stone and the pillars are engraved with intricate carvings. The garden is well cared for, decorated with fountains and flower beds. When the three of them returned with their guards, a guest was just leaving. They came face to face with that guest in front of the gate, and Kreschenta felt Berry's arm tense. Berry's brow was slightly furrowed as she looked at the man before them. Kreschenta curiously followed her gaze. "Oh my, Berry-sama. You have grown beautiful. You look lovely." The fat middle-aged man greeted them. He wore a gaudy red coat and his slacks looked like they were bursting at the seams. Gold accessories decorated his fingers and a large ruby hung around his neck. The man removed his silk hat and bowed elegantly, his gaze crawling down Berry's body as he did so. Krish's arm was entwined with Berry's and she could feel Berry tense. Kreschenta is familiar with this kind of lustful gazes. Grace drew such gazes in the village, and Kreschenta also clearly remembers that unpleasant man she killed for touching her had also looked at her like that. Such gazes are common when walking around town with Berry, even today. Kreschenta did not care since there was no harm, but frowned now as she saw Berry's reaction. They had come back in a good mood after having a fun time. But the instant Berry met this man, that mood disappeared and Berry looked distressed. It is very rare for Berry to look distressed. Berry has a gentle disposition and makes special effort to not show Kreschenta such emotions, so Kreschenta has never seen Berry like this. But Berry looks distressed now. At this point, Kreschenta already found the man unpleasant. "Nice to meet you too, Oju-samas. I am Roland, a merchant. Pleased to make your acquaintance." He bowed to Celine, then to Kreschenta. His gaze was less blatant than when on Berry. "It must be thanks to the goddess of fortune, I say, for me to have this chance to lay eyes on Margrave Kristan's two beautiful princesses. Your beauty is just as rumored and joy fills my heart. You have a good tongue, Roland." "Ha ha ha, I mean it," Celine replied as a noble would, but did not let him kiss her hand and looked at him in disdain. It is rare for Celine to look at someone she had just met like this, even if he is a commoner. "It has been a while, Roland-sama." "Yes, indeed. How many years has it been?" Lazura-sama was beautiful, but Berry-sama could be mistaken for her. "You look very alike." "Thank you." Berry's voice was stiff. Roland smiled unpleasant as he spoke, but Berry replied expressionlessly. Kreschenta could feel the tension grow in Berry's arm, and Krish's displeasure grew with it as she looked towards Celine. Celine noticed Krish's gaze and stepped forward. "Sorry, but we are tired after looking around the market. Could you move?" "Ah, silly me, my apologies." "Thanks. See you again if there is such a chance. Please excuse us now. Let's go, Berry." "Yes, Oju-sama." They passed by him and went through the gate. Roland kept his head lowered until the door closed behind them. Celine sighed in irritation. That was disgusting. A gaze that blatant is unusual. Such an unpleasant man. Berry, who was that? A merchant that used to work with the Argan house. It is not somebody I want to see either. Berry smiled bitterly. Although she has returned to her usual self, her voice is still a little stiff. Celine did not inquire any further. Celine does not know all the details of Berry's past. Her mother had said that they were saved when they were facing difficult times, but her parents did not speak any more on the matter. Berry herself also does not speak of that time, but Celine knows the fate of nobles that go bankrupt. She could infer who that man is based on Berry's words. The displeasure she felt grew stronger and she vented it by pinching Krish's cheeks. "Yuri, how long are you going to cling to Berry? We are guests here, so behave yourself properly when we are here. And, now. Berry is also spoiling Kreschenta too much, seriously." Kreschenta reluctantly let go at Celine's sudden unreasonable demand and looked up at Berry. Berry smiled back with her usual smile. Chapter 30. Killing Intent, Wishes and Love. Celine and Berry are special to Kreschenta. This is why Kreschenta paid extra attention to Berry. Berry smiled and appeased Bogan's concerns. She appeared to enjoy their meal and they bathed together like usual, but Berry seemed a little different from normal. Kreschenta thought about the reason, and the more she thought about it, the more unpleasant she felt. Let's kill him. It did not take long for her to come to that decision. Kreschenta feels nothing about killing people. Killing people and plucking fruits are the same for her. She will pluck a fruit if she is hungry, and she will kill if the person is unpleasant. After coming to the estate, Kreschenta has always been in a good mood because of Berry. That toned down her abnormality, but her true nature has not changed. She is still abnormal. Berry is important to Kreschenta. Anything that is unpleasant to Berry is also extremely unpleasant for Kreschenta, and she did not hesitate to start making plans. Kreschenta empathized with Berry in her own way, and that resulted in this decision. Kreschenta was able to infer a little about that man based on Berry's story in the carriage. It is just a vague guess that he is someone that did horrible things to Berry in the past, but that is enough. Kreschenta did not mind it much when she heard Berry's story at first, since it is a thing of the past. But since he showed up before them and Anne is causing Berry distress, it would be better to kill him. Krish's thinking is simple. But then, Berry is a problem. Berry is always by Krish's side, even when sleeping. This is because Kreschenta wished for it and it makes her very happy, but it is a problem today. In the end, Kreschenta had to wait for Berry to fall asleep. Kreschenta desperately fought the usual sleepiness brought on by Berry's warmth and slipped out of bed. Kreschenta took care not to wake Berry and turned to stare at her beautiful sleeping face for a while, resisting the usual urge to kiss her. Kreschenta breathed a sigh of relief after confirming that Berry is deep asleep, then quietly put on her cloak inside out and pulled up the hood, hiding her thin pink negligée. The cloak has silver embroidery and the Christ and crest on the chest, but it is made of many layers of cloth, and when turned inside out, it becomes pitch black. Their room is narrow, half of a room that was refurbished into 2 rooms. Rooms like this are common in the estate due to number of visiting nobles. Due to this layout, Celine's room is accessible from their balcony. The weather is good. The bright moonlight will be a problem though. Kreschenta judged that it should be fine with the cloak and planned to travel along the roofs. Kreschenta ignored her curved sword and drew her knife. This is so that Berry does not notice even if she wakes up. Kreschenta planned to finish this quickly, fast enough that she could say she just went outside for a breath of fresh air. According to Bogan, Roland just happened to be visiting this town and came to give his regards to the noble in charge here. Kreschenta had also heard Bogan mention that Roland is staying at a nearby inn. Luckily, there is only one high-class inn nearby. No need to spend time searching. Even if Kreschenta cannot find him, she can just grab a person or 2 and torture them. Let's go. But Kreschenta glanced at Berry, then looked away. Will she really stay asleep? If Berry woke up right after Kreschenta left, Kreschenta would not be able to explain herself. Berry will be angry if she finds out. What if she hates Kreschenta because of this? The unease grew in Krish's heart. This emotion is a recent discovery for Kreschenta. Berry is kind and soft on Kreschenta. As Kreschenta grew more dependent on Berry, even the smallest things makes her uneasy. Since her dependence is the cause, Kreschenta had thought about fixing it a few times, but Berry is so kind and hard to distance. Kreschenta did not want to lose this feeling of comfort, and her dependence grew as she mulled over this. The stronger her dependence grew, the stronger her unease over being hated by Berry became. Kreschenta is not used to and does not know how to deal with this emotion, so she does not know what to do. She grew uncertain about why she was doing this. Berry is distressed. So Kreschenta will kill that man. Kreschenta is doing this for Berry, but Berry will not approve of this. That is natural. This breaks the rules. Kreschenta wants Berry to tell Kreschenta if Berry does not like something or is angry. It is okay. Why would I dislike it or get angry when the Krishsama I love is trying to make me happy? Will doing this make Berry happy? No. To get rid of something that distresses Berry, Kreschenta will be doing something Berry will not be happy about. Thoughts spun around in Krish's mind as she stared at Berry. Krishsama. J stepped back in surprise and her hand knocked into the shelf. J watched Berry as the sound echoed, but it was just Berry's sleep talk. J let out a sigh of relief and stepped away from the shelf, but her cloak had caught on her sword and knocked it to the ground. Ah! The sound this time was too loud. Krish-sama? Berry's eyes opened a little. J froze, staring at Berry. Berry sat up, her thin negligee revealing itself from under the blanket, and tilted her head. What happened? Why is Krish-sama wearing a cloak? J wanted to take a breath of fresh air. Does this room smell that bad? Berry sniffed the air, but there was no particular smell. She approached J and extended a hand, but J backed into the shelf. Berry frowned suspiciously at Krish's reaction as she placed her hand on Krish's brow. Temperature seems normal. My body temperature is high since I was just sleeping, so this might not be accurate. Krish's eyes wandered. My nose might be off too. How does Krish-sama feel? Does any part of Krish-sama's body feel weird? No, Fatigue might have built up from being cooped up in the carriage. Berry rummaged through her bag and retrieved a piece of fruit. Let's peel this fruit and enjoy it. It will refresh us and is good nutrition. Which one would Krish-sama like? J hugged Berry, her eyes on the ground. Berry was bewildered, but realized that J was acting strange. She hugged J to calm her down and patted her head. J looked like a child about to be scolded. What happened? Did you do something that I would scold you for? J hesitated for a moment, then nodded. J told a lie. A lie, about what? Berry embraced Krish's trembling body. She soothed J and calmed her down, then tapped J on the back, pulling away. Berry undid the knot at Krish's collar and removed the cloak. J resisted for a moment, then gave up. Berry's expression turned surprised when she realized J was holding a knife. Berry fell into thought for a while, but did not remark on it and took it from J, picking up the fruit in her other hand. Let's eat something sweet and calm down first. Come, please sit down. They brought a small table to the bed and Saturday. Berry placed the apple on a handkerchief and sliced it, cutting the slices to resemble rabbits, and fed J. J silently bit into the slice and took it from Berry, finishing it over a few small bites. Is it tasty? Yes. Berry started carving another apple. She dexterously handled the knife and ate the extra cuttings herself, smiling at J. But Krish's expression remained dark. Berry hesitated for a moment, then smiled bitterly. Honestly, I would be lying if I said I do not resent him. At that time, I also wanted to kill him. J widened her eyes in surprise and looked at Berry. Berry smiled back. Even I think such thoughts too. Berry said simply. When I first joined the Kreschentas, I read Master's books and learnt physical enhancement for combat. I also asked Master to train me in self-defense. As I said before, my body was weak at that time, so I told Master and Nae-sama that I wanted to become more fit, but that was actually to kill Roland-sama. Berry did. Yes, I was a young child. Fufu, but it seems like they realized pretty quickly, just that my body was getting better bit by bit as I learnt physical enhancement, so they could not bring themselves to say anything though they knew the reason I was so fervent about it. Berry's smile turned nostalgic. After Oji-sama was born, Nae-sama seemed very happy. Nae-sama was similar to me, her body was not very strong and we worried for her, but she pulled through childbirth. I was preparing to leave after that, but we happened to cook together. Cook? Yes. Nae-sama, Fufu, she was just like Oji-sama, so clumsy when it comes to these things, just remembering it makes me laugh. Why are you the only one that is so dexterous? No fair. Nae-sama has a lot of things that I do not, so it balances out. Well, can't help what we don't have. Roland had money and the Argan house did not. That's all. Nae-sama said that it was fate. The Argan house had no money and Nae-sama was defiled. But thanks to that she met Master and was blessed with Oji-sama. Nae-sama said she had found happiness. She might be clumsy but she had a dexterous sister to make up for it. She said she was happy eating my delicious cooking every day. The apple's shape slowly changed, forming the side profile of a woman. My greatest regret was letting Naysama be defiled. I could not forgive that, but Naysama told me that if I wished for her happiness, she would be happier if I was grateful for where fate has brought us and found happiness myself rather than be caught in the past and commit a crime. She said that since I am good at handling blades, I should use it for cooking, not stabbing people. Berry sighed and placed the apple and knife down on the handkerchief. Kreschenta, did you pick up that knife for my sake? Kreschenta is not sure. Kreschenta replied weakly. That person makes Berry feel unpleasant, so Kreschenta also finds him unpleasant. So, but Kreschenta knows Berry would not like this, so Kreschenta is not sure. Kreschenta is not sure if this is good or bad. Krish's voice faltered. Then you did it for my sake. It was my fault for making Kreschenta so worried. Berry is not. Berry pressed a slice of apple to Krish's lips and smiled. I agreed with Naysama, but at the same time I also believed that she could only say that because we were lucky. In the end, Naysama passed away together with her second child. A younger sister would be nice, but a younger brother would also be good. You showed me how they can help make up for what you are lacking. I want to give Celine a younger sister or brother. Bogan said he wants a boy, but seeing how he dotes on Celine, both seem fine. I will be leaving her alone. Take care of her in my place, Berry. She is similar to you. I'm worried that she will work too hard. Ojusama was a little too serious and stubborn. Naysama was worried about Ojusama and wanted to give her a younger sister or brother. She thought that it would let Ojusama relax a little. So she tried, but failed. Berry lowered her eyes as she recalled the past. And so Naysama left Ojusama in my care. I did my best to act bright, to make up for Naysama. But Ojusama kept driving herself further into a corner. I am really bad at these things, I just do not know what to do. But then, Kreschenta arrived. Kreschenta? Yes, Kreschenta. Berry pulled Kreschenta closer and laid Krish's head on her lap, stroking Krish's brow. After Kreschenta arrived, Celine-sama became so cheerful that she is like a completely different person. I also enjoy doing many things together every day and had a lot of fun. This must be what Naysama meant by fate. Fate. I resent Roland-sama. But thanks to him, Naysama met Master. I met Ojusama and I also met Kreschenta. That's why I am very happy now, and even if I could redo the past, I would still choose the path that would let me meet Kreschenta. Berry's loving caress moved from Krish's brow to her cheek. Berry's smile was extremely gentle. Kreschenta is a lot more dexterous than me. Most things would be simple for Kreschenta, but I would like for Kreschenta to use that strength for fun things, for happier things. Fun? Yes. Killing someone with a knife might make you feel better, but using the same knife to cook is much for fun and a much happier thing, right? Yes. At the very least, that is what Naysama taught me. Thanks to that, I am very happy right now. I wish for Kreschenta to find such happiness too, so I am teaching Kreschenta the same thing. That is all. Krish's eyes wavered as she looked up at Berry. They wavered uneasily, the eyes of a lost, scared child. Kreschenta eventually met Berry's eyes again and asked hesitatingly, Berry is not angry at Kreschenta? Kreschenta picked up the blade for my sake. I am very happy about that. If as a result of that, Kreschenta does something that someone would be angry about, I am also guilty. At that time, I will atone for it as well. But Berry did not. Berry's pressed a finger to Krish's lips. Her touch was gentle, a mere caress, but it was enough to seal away Krish's words. That is how it is. I have decided to stay with Kreschenta no matter what, so please keep that in mind. I am more stubborn than I look. Berry laughed cheerfully and continued. But rather than getting scolded together, I would prefer to cook together, drink tea together and rest together like this. If Kreschenta feels the same about me, if meeting me was also fate for Kreschenta, then... Berry paused for a moment, shutting her eyes before continuing softly. Please, stay with me like this forever. Berry's words made Kreschenta feel vague, uncertain emotions. Kreschenta does not know what those are. But no matter what they are, Krish's answer is set. Kreschenta embraced Berry, raising herself to sit on Berry's lap. Kreschenta pressed her lips to Berry's to convey her own feelings, then answered happily. J also wants to say with Berry, forever. They fell silent for a while with Berry just stroking Krish's pale cheek. Tearful brown eyes surrounded by long lashes peered into Krish's eyes, and the hand stroking her cheek felt comfortable. J tilted her head at Berry's silence, but Berry clasped Krish's cheeks between her hands. NN. And silently replied by slowly pressing her lips to Krish's. Berry's lips gently touched Krish's, pressed harder, then slowly pulled away reluctantly. To J, it felt like a much longer kiss than usual. Ah! Berry seemed to come back to her senses and pulled away, her cheeks turning bright red and her eyes wandering. This is the first time Berry has kissed J on the lips. J was a little surprised, but was also delighted and returned the kiss. Carefully, just like how Berry did it. Berry's cheeks grew even redder and her voice was a little shrill when she spoke. It is late, shall we sleep? Ahihi, okay, the apple. Why, yes. I forgot, we have to eat it first. J will feed Berry. Here, on. Oh, okay, on. The sound of a door slamming came from the balcony and they turned. But the balcony door was still open. The sound must have come from Celine's room. Celine. J tilted her head while Berry scratched her cheek and smiled awkwardly. The next day. Celine, are you okay? Whose fault do you think it is? They had just finished their breakfast, got dressed and were about to board the carriage. Celine glared at J as she sniffled. She had caught a cold after being standing in the cold night wind for an extended period of time last night. Instinct. Celine had a vague premonition. Bogan had also met Roland and had spoken to Berry, concerned about her. At that time, Celine's thoughts were that this confirms that something had happened in the past. It was a coincidence that the unpleasant merchant Roland had paid a visit to this estate. But then Bogan mentioned that Roland is staying at a nearby inn. J had been concerned about Berry this whole time, but she had looked at Bogan then. She had been expressionless as per usual. But for some reason, this caught Celine's attention. Krish's mood shows surprisingly easily. When they were looking around the market, the corners of her mouth were relaxed and she looked happy. After they came back, she had grown more and more expressionless. Since J was concerned over Berry's unusual behavior, it is natural that her good mood would dissipate since she is worried about Berry. But even so, Celine felt uneasy. If there is a need, J would not hesitate to kill. J is attached to Berry, to a precarious extent. She would not forgive anything that saddens Berry. If she does not forgive, what would she do? Celine could not believe that J would not do it. The sight of J killing the most people on the battlefield was burnt into her eyes. Celine also knows how simple J is. This might be overthinking. But even as she thought that, Celine stood at the balcony connecting her room to the next. Celine had been standing on the balcony, the cold balcony exposed to the night wind. After Berry woke up and the two started talking, Celine could not return to her room. So she could only endure it and stand there listening to their conversation. She had returned to her room after hearing Berry convince J, but this had resulted in catching a cold. People like Celine who have strong mana are tougher than normal people, but that does not mean they cannot catch colds. Going out in her sleepwear with only a blanket draped over her shoulders was also part of the problem. But it was just instinct and she was not sure. Since it would be weird to get dressed for a hunch, in a sense it was inevitable that she ended up standing there in that outfit. She could have returned to her room when it got too cold, but Celine is part of the army. She is so overly serious that she applied the rule of not leaving your post without a replacement to this situation, and it led to this. Since her bad premonition had come true, it was not a waste is what Celine tried to convince herself. But since Berry solved everything, Celine did not do anything and felt like she lost out. Celine sniffed disgruntledly. How about resting in the carriage? I can ride a horse with Krishsama. My cold is not that bad. And at times like this, it's better to breathe the outside air than be cooped up somewhere cramped. Berry's brow was creased in worry, but Celine replied in a sulking tone. Galen had been watching them and interjected. But you need to participate in a ceremony. Don't be stubborn. You can ride on the luggage cart. But, Galen-sama, I appreciate your concern, but that would look too Just hang a curtain. A soldier's treasure is their own body, whether you are a commander or common soldier. Didn't Bogan teach you that? Yes. Celine blushed. Berry glanced towards the luggage cart and got an idea. Then how about the three of us ride together? The luggage area is quite empty and we should not need to worry about transmission if we leave a gap for wind. We can also watch over her. You. The luggage cart has some luggage, but it is meant to carry the valuables they will be rewarded on the trip back, so there is plenty of space. The three of them can fit with no problem. Berry and the soldiers quickly set up a curtain with Kreschenta helping, then laid out a large amount of blankets at Krish's request. Kreschenta happily hugged Celine from behind while Berry watched them with a smile. Thank you very much, Oju-sama. I did not do anything you need to thank me for. It was weirdly infuriating when the two of them had started flirting after their conversation, so Celine had slammed the door loudly enough for them to hear, but she glossed over that. Part of it is because she is sulking, but it is also because she had heard Berry's story. There's no need to take care of me anymore. You should focus on taking care of Kreschenta. Berry's eyes widened, then lowered. Okay. I am sorry for overstepping my bounds. I am grateful too. Celine spoke without looking at Berry. Okasama's wish came true. Right here. I got a stupid, empty-headed, idiotic and troublesome sister. So neither of us are able to focus on ourselves. Is this fate too? Yes, it must be. I believe it is. Berry stroked Krish's head as Kreschenta puffed out her cheeks. Kreschenta is not stupid. You are the only one that thinks that. Hi. Celine pinched Krish's cheek without even looking back. Berry laughed softly as she stopped Celine. And their journey continued. Chapter 31. The Capital of Delusions. The capital, Albanaria. The Albaran kingdom began as a small tribe in the forest. Compared to other tribes, they were very skilled with their hands and proficient at construction. In an age when strength was everything, they built walls and fortresses. They were not particularly skilled at fighting, but they used wisdom to make up for their military strength and took in the surrounding tribes. They grew even more powerful after obtaining the ash from the southwest mountains. This ash was discovered by accident and they found out that when it clumps together, it becomes very durable. They researched into it and understood how it worked, developing forged stone. They used this to build strongholds and walls, creating many fortresses and fortified cities. There was no longer anyone in the vicinity that could match them. The king declared himself the descendant of god Albaran and built the capital Albanaria at the center of the kingdom, making it the foundation of the kingdom's power. The capital is the symbol of the king's power. Albanaria is surrounded by tall walls made of forged stone. The castle and houses within are all built with forged stone as well. This beautiful white city stands in the middle of a plain, glittering in the sunlight. Because of its appearance, Albanaria is known as the White City. They passed through the town sprawling outside the walls and entered through the huge gates. Kreschenta stared blankly at all the houses made of forged stone. It all seems very sturdy. No other city is built with so much forged stone. Wood and clay walls are easier to build and are cheaper. The wealthy and artisans that work with fire live in houses built of brick and forged stone, so it is not unusual, but it is rare to see so much of it. This city seems difficult to burn, Kreschenta observed as she stared at the colorful roofs despite the name of White City. Compared to the crowds of merchants outside the walls, it became quiet once through the gates and the pedestrians are all well dressed. After passing through the city and a district of large estates, they arrived at the castle gates which are on higher grounds. Beyond this point is royal land. Even nobles cannot step through these castle gates without permission. Their guards, excluding the coachman, also cannot follow. Inside the gates was a large garden. Water had been drawn in from a nearby river to create a small river flowing through the garden. The garden is designed to be vibrant with fountains here and there. The few people present, clearly nobles, straightened upon seeing them and placed the palm of their right hand to their left chest. The military salute meaning, I offer my life to you. Celine and Galen replied with the same salute while Bogan replied by making a gesture as if stabbing at his heart with his right thumb. That is a replying salute made by superiors meaning, your loyalty will be my flesh and blood. General, the only higher rank than that is the general of the army, which belongs to the royal prince. So Bogan is higher ranked than any of the nobles here. Kreschenta stared at the scenery outside the carriage's small window while Berry adjusted Krish's attire until the carriage came to a stop. They did not stop at the towering white palace, but at a small estate. This estate is for them to store their luggage and prepare themselves. This is a temporary measure and they will be granted one of the estates outside the castle walls later. Foo-foo, perfect. Come, let's go out. Okay. Berry looked over Kreschenta and smiled in satisfaction, then stepped out of the carriage. She then turned to offer a hand to help Kreschenta down. She is being more careful with her actions because they are being watched by other nobles. There are always people that will spread malicious rumors about the slightest mistake. Berry is acting more like a servant than usual as she guided Kreschenta in order to avoid such rumors. Kreschenta is also acting more proper than usual. She placed her hand in Berry's and stood straight. Since she had studied before they departed, she acted more like a noble than most nobles. A dozen servants and an elderly man in a black suit stood in front of the doors with their heads bowed. The elderly man, the butler, raised his head and smiled as he saw Bogan. Welcome, Margrave Kreschenta. I am Orzel. I am in charge of the Arun estate. We are the servants that will be taking care of your every need and will ensure that your stay is pleasant. The king's brothers and other direct relatives are archdukes. More distant relatives would be dukes. Below duke is Margrave, meaning Bogan has the highest rank among normal nobles. Unless there are exceptional circumstances, generals that guard the kingdom's borders usually hold the rank of Margrave. Below that is Earl, Baron, then Knight. These ranks are remnants from a time when feudal lords existed and wielded great power, but now they are ranks granted to represent the lands under a noble's charge and their duties. Stay. We are staying here. Not an estate outside. Yes, that is what I have heard. Please excuse me. Orzel drew closer to Bogan and whispered something to him. Bogan nodded with a look of understanding. Understood. We will be in your care then. I will be going around to make my greetings later. Yes, sir. If you could tell me who you plan to meet, I could check their availability. As the two of them talked, a young servant with her black hair gathered in a bun at the back of her head and dressed in an apron dress approached Kreschenta and Berry. Let me carry those, Argansama. She took their luggage from Berry and bowed her head, addressing Berry by her family name though Berry had not yet introduced herself. Thank you very much. We will be in your care. Berry also made a small bow in reply, impressed that they are aware of the identity of the guest servants. Servants are generally the daughters of nobles or wealthy families under a live-in apprenticeship. In order to avoid assassins and spies, the servants of nobles must have proper backgrounds. Commoners cannot be hired as servants, and it is the norm for lower-ranking nobles to entrust their daughters to higher-ranking nobles as servants under a live-in apprenticeship. This is partly for their daughters to learn etiquette, but there is also the calculation of possibly becoming mistresses or even wives. Marriage is a connection between houses, and higher-ranking nobles hardly ever wed lower-ranking nobles. But they might develop feelings for their servants, and good-looking servants could catch the eyes of higher-ranking nobles. Such connections lead to success in life, so lower-ranking nobles willingly entrust their daughters to higher-ranking nobles, and there is no shortage of servants. This is a system that has developed over time. Servants working on royal land, which is often visited by higher-ranking nobles, are also naturally of higher rank, so most would be higher-ranking than Berry, whose family's rank is Baron. But the servants of guests are treated as of higher rank. Although Berry knew about this, she was honestly surprised that they are aware of her background. Berry was impressed by the quality of royal servants, but this is an extremely special case. Even royal servants do not normally check up on the servants of guests. Some nobles would bring more than a dozen servants. Finding out about all of them would take a lot of effort, and even if they did, it would be impossible to differentiate between similarly dressed servants that they had never met. But this time is different. The servants working on royal land knows the rumors of various nobles. Bogan had lost his wife, so naturally there were nobles that offered their daughters to work under him. A rank that has been earned is hardly ever lost, so although Kreschenta is a new Margrave, he is a good target for marriage. But Bogan turned them all down. Bogan did not want to keep a mistress, a rare thing in this age. He had vowed that his wife would be his partner for life and had no intentions of marrying again. Berry is also extremely skilled as a servant, so there was no inconvenience. Berry herself also did not require extra hands, and Bogan does not like unnecessary expenditure. He had no reason to hire new servants and turned down all the offers, but those that did not know his personal circumstances saw things differently. It is common for margraves to have dozens of servants. So it is natural for people to assume there is some profound reason for a margrave to stick to only one servant, especially if that servant is the younger sister of his lost wife. So it is no wonder that many suspect that Berry is Bogan's mistress. It would not be good for appearances to marry his wife's younger sister right after losing her, so they have not officially wed yet, but that would mean Berry is effectively Mrs. Kreschenta. So it is natural for them to pay extra attention to Berry. Although the Kreschenta house was originally weak, it is now a margrave. Nobody thought the master of such a house would only have one daughter, Celine, as the sole successor. It is perfectly normal to assume that he is waiting to marry Berry and have more children. Although there are female head of houses among nobles, childbirth is life-threatening. Even after taking a husband, there is the possibility of a stillbirth and the mother passing away from puerperal fever without leaving a child, so sons are normally named as heir. There is no prejudice against female heirs, but it is not welcomed either. Because of Berry's background and position, it is natural to assume she will be the margrave's next wife. And considering that Bogan stubbornly refuses to hire any other servants, any other women, Berry's personality is suspected to be the cause. It is suspected that she is a deeply jealous woman. Because of these reasons, the servants saw Berry as extremely dangerous. She is someone they must not be rude or discourteous towards. But Berry was unaware of their wariness. Although she has the manners of a noble, Berry's body was weak and she did not go out as much as her sister. She lacks knowledge of high society. She had no way of knowing the servants' image of her and was simply impressed by them, thinking that she has to learn from them. The estate they were escorted through was more extravagant than the Kreschenta estate. Paintings hung on the walls and decorations lined the shelves. A dazzling chandelier hung in the entranceway. Kreschenta thought about how hard it must be to clean as Berry guided her by the hand to a room on the second floor. This will be Kreschenta's room. Argensama's room is. That can wait. The luggage is Kreschenta's. Understood. The servant girl and glanced at Berry's luggage, at the many fruits in the basket, as she bowed her head. She was wondering if they had a special liking for fruits when she realized that Berry had taken Krish's cloak while she was spacing out. Even if Berry is a servant, and should not let the margrave's future wife do that. She quickly took the folded cloak from Berry and placed it in a laundry basket in the corner of the room. Berry's room is different. Yes, I am a servant, so. Kreschenta drew closer to Berry and whispered to her. Berry also replied softly. A girl dressed in a black one-piece dress with silver embroidery, her silky, almost see-through, silver hair framing an adorable fairy-like face, Kreschenta. Together with a woman with neat shoulder-length red hair and a youthful, but mature beauty, Berry, and blushed as she watched them whisper to each other, their faces close together, and had heard rumors that the two Kreschenta daughters and their servant are especially beautiful. But they exceeded Anne's imagination. Anne knows that she is cute, but she feels ridiculous now. These people are like characters from a fairy tale and she can only sigh in admiration. On top of that, the distance between them felt somewhat immoral, and hastily stopped her wild imagination. Kreschenta is in her teens. She is petite and slender, but has grown to have a distinct female charm. There are even girls at her age that have already married and given birth. Berry is aware of this and is being careful about the distance between them, especially with Krish's dependence on her. But their usual habits are showing through. Even if they stood apart, they are leaning towards each other. Kreschenta looked as if she was snuggling up to Berry with her hand rested on Berry's arm. The young, beautiful lady and her servant, their distance was close enough to make it feel immoral. Berry believed she was maintaining a proper distance just by standing apart, but they were clearly half a step, no a step too close. She would have realized this 2 years ago, but by now, her sense of distance between herself and Kreschenta has been numbed. This could have led to gossip, but Anne stopped herself at the sensible interpretation that they are just very close. and is aware of her own love for stories and overly rich imagination. She convinced herself that she was just imagining it because they were too pretty, and still does not know that many trials await her during their stay due to this part of her personality. Kreschenta pouted a little and Berry smiled wryly while suggesting that they had some tea, and hastily stepped forward as she saw Berry head towards the teapot. And is a hard worker but is a little slow. That is one of her many flaws. Black tea? Please leave such trivial matters to me. Okay, sorry for stepping out of line. No, it is all right. Right after saying that, and berated herself, what's all right? Berry seemed a little surprised, but smiled quietly. Her smile was elegant, without any contempt, and her eyes were filled with kindness. Her mannerism are smooth and her bow as she stepped out of the way was beautiful. This alone was enough for Anne to be convinced that Berry is superior as a servant, and had carefully prepared for their arrival today. Everything is perfect. She had checked the room 7 times and changed the hot water every hour, and knows that freshly boiled water is best for bringing out the fragrance of tea leaves. But when Anne approached the teapot, she heard a bubbling sound. Steam was gushing out of the spout. Oh my, the teapot must have been left on boil. And froze. Berry reached towards the magic crystal and injected mana. The sound died down as Anne's face turned red. Fresh water. But boiling it too much is taboo. Anne's carefully prepared perfection has crumbled already, along with her composure. Being weak to sudden setbacks is another one of her flaws that she is well aware of. I will change the water. No, there's no need. It is all right. What's all right? Anne was berating herself again when she realized Berry was staring at her and froze again, and could only stare back. Berry's hair is casually parted in a 7:3 ratio, but her red hair is fine and silky, giving off an impression of cleanliness for some reason. Her eyebrows are fine and well-shaped, her large, kind eyes are framed by long lashes and double eyelids. Her nose is elegantly straight and her lips are sakura pink. Her features are pretty and has a somewhat sexual charm. Part of it is likely due to her womanly figure. Her breasts are well-shaped and bountiful, but her waist is narrow, and had not known that the same apron dress could look so different. Beautiful, cute, amazing. Berry's apron is spotless, as if it is brand new. Then Berry suddenly smiled, and was once again captivated by that beautiful smile. Please do not be so nervous. Kreschenta is not so particular about mannerisms, and neither am I. Please act as usual. Oh, okay. After another smile towards the frozen and, Berry prepared tea with practiced motions, and was impressed by each of her smooth, fluid motions, every one of them filled with care. She had not known that the simple action of brewing tea could be so impressive, and has the strength of being easily impressed. It might also be a flaw. Berry only prepared the tea, then went back to Kreschenta, sitting down next to her on the sofa. The distance between them really is close. Kreschenta snuggled even closer to Berry and leaned towards her as she stared at Anne with interest but still expressionless. What happened? Nothing, she just seemed a little nervous. She is being too careful around us. Anne placed the tea that was like a work of art on a tray and slowly approached them. Even if it was brewed with over-boiled water, it is still a work of art. Anne's hand trembled as she placed the teacups on saucers and carefully poured the tea. Her hand trembled even more as she felt their gazes on her. Kreschenta finally understood that it must be embarrassing to be so clumsy as she watched Anne. It is embarrassing for anyone to show their inexperience. Kreschenta recalled how embarrassing it was for Gorka to see her poorly dissected rabbit. Kreschenta was happy to be able to empathize with a stranger and excitedly turned to Berry. I got it. She is nervous because she is embarrassed that she's clumsy. Hi. The tea splattered a little, a few drops landing in the saucer. I'm sorry. Kreschenta, you cannot say that. But it is embarrassing to be seen when so bad. Stop. You mew. Anne was hastily wiping the spilled tea with a cloth when she saw Berry press a finger to Krish's lips out of the corner of her eye. This is already a habit for Berry. Berry stared into Krish's eyes, their noses almost touching. Being told she is bad when she is trying her best will make her even more tense. Let's see. Please try imagining being told you are bad when you are testing out a new recipe and it does not work out. That is not nice. Yes. Being considerate is very important. Small things like that can hurt people. Please be careful. Okay. Berry smiled as Kreschenta averted her gaze, stroking Krish's cheek and tracing her lips with her thumb. Berry smiled as she traced Krish's lips, telling Kreschenta she was not angry. Kreschenta nodded and drew closer. This is already beyond the distance where their noses are touching, but since they were not alone, Kreschenta had to draw away as Berry whispered, "Not now," with a troubled look, and pulled her hand away. And caught sight of this scene as she was cleaning up. Were they about to kiss? Her face grew bright red as she imagined what was mostly the truth. But she quickly decided that she was imagining things and shook her head. After so many mistakes, she does not have the time to be daydreaming. The tea leaves are graberas. It has quite a refreshing fragrance compared to the almare we usually drink. Berry showed no signs of noticing and expression as she changed the topic. She was worried about Kreschenta being down after being scolded. But Kreschenta was relieved that Berry acted as normal and really did not seem angry. Kreschenta took a whiff of the tea and responded. "Jillian, no, more like Azem." "Yes. Unlike almare, the fragrance is from the original tea leaves. In that sense, it is the same as Jillian and Azem, but you are correct. Graberas is related to Azem. It has a more refreshing taste than Azem, so I would recommend it straight or with lemon." And suddenly realized something as she listened to Berry while pouring the tea, and had been prepared to answer, "This is graberas. It has a refreshing taste, so it is recommended to straight or with lemon if asked," but she had not prepared lemons. "Sure, shall I get some lemons?" "No, not for me. Kreschenta, how about you?" Kreschenta hesitated as she watched the steam rising from the tea. Kreschenta wanted to answer the same as Berry, but Krish's tongue is sensitive. Extremely sensitive. Berry saw her dilemma and laughed softly. She took the honey and added a scoop to her tea, then added even more to Krish's. She then slowly mixed them to let the tea cool as she turned to Anne. "What is the schedule for the day after tomorrow? Please come to the castle at the 4th morning bell. A day is 24 hours, starting from sunrise. There are large clocks built from magic crystals that can tell the exact time, but in most places, time changes according to the seasons and the time of sunrise. So instead of saying which hour of the day, such as 7th hour or 10th hour, time is stated as which hour of the morning, or which hour of the afternoon after the sun is at the highest point and which hour of the night after the sun sets. Since a bell is rang every hour, the 4th morning bell indicates the 4th hour after sunrise. Kreschenta, we will take a bath and start preparing from sunrise on the day after tomorrow. We will need to arrange your hair and prepare many other things, so we will be quite busy." "Okay. Krish's hair needs to be arranged?" "Yes. Kreschenta's hair is pretty when let down straight like this, but it will also be nice to arrange it properly sometimes. Berry will arrange it nicely for you." Okay." Kreschenta smiled happily. It was a pretty smile, beautiful and adorable. And had heard of a fairy-like lady, and Kreschenta is just as mysterious and ephemeral as rumored, but when she shows such an expression, she suddenly becomes flesh and blood. Kreschenta was leaning on Berry. They were in close contact due to Kreschenta gradually edging closer, but at some point, and no longer felt anything wrong about it. The sight of the two of them in the afternoon light is just like a scene from a painting. "Here, please drink, Kreschenta." Berry handed Kreschenta the tea, which has cooled to a moderate temperature, and Kreschenta took a sip, and could only stare at the two of them in a daze as they smiled at each other. Getting distracted and forgetting her work is also another one of Anne's flaws. Chapter 32, Royal Prince. The kingdom currently has an ongoing problem. The king has contracted a mysterious illness, and this led to a dispute over the succession of the throne. This dispute occurred because the king named the 11-year-old princess, Kreschenta, his successor instead of the royal prince, Guildenstein, who was originally first in line for the throne. The royal prince Guildenstein is a perverse person who enjoys toying with slaves and other unethical, obscene entertainment. The king judged that Guildenstein's behavior was not suitable to be his successor to be the next king of Alberon. In the kingdom, The king wields absolute power and the king's wishes are prioritized above all else. But that is only on the surface. Abuse of authority would be met with resistance, and pushing it too far could lead to revolution. The king's nomination is normally irreversible, but in reality, if there is a certain number of dissenters, it would be hard to push through with it. And right now, the palace is currently split into the royal prince faction and princess faction. I did not expect your highness to meet me in person. Bogan knelt on one knee and lowered his head. A man in his early 20s stood before him. A handsome young man with backswept blonde hair. The man removed a resplendently decorated rapier from his waist and laid it on a table, then stripped off the nondescript cloak he was wearing and threw it aside onto the carpet as he sat on the sofa, crossing his legs. Inside, he was wearing a gold and black jacket with gold ornaments and white pants. He raised his left arm, which was adorned with a gold bracelet, and spoke. "Raise your head, Bogan. I did not come to meet the hero, General Kreschenta. I simply came to speak to an old acquaintance. There is no need for the formalities." "Understood. Thank you." The man indicated the opposite sofa as Bogan stood up. "This man is the royal prince and first in line for the throne. Guildenstein Kalnaros Vel Sakarinia Alberon. An archduke of the kingdom and the general of the army, someone much higher ranking than a margrave, than Bogan. He appears young, but appearances are deceiving for nobles that use mana. He is in his mid-30s. The bodies of those with mana usually stay in their prime for a longer period, so it is common for many to only show signs of aging past their 40s. It's already been 15 years since we've met in person." "Yes, your highness. Since the battle with the Empire." "No need for yes, your highness. It's just the two of us here." "This is troublesome," Bogan thought as he bowed his head. Bogan has no interest in the infighting happening in the palace. He had wanted to join in such things when younger, but that desire has been lost with age. Bogan does not want to get involved with the palace politics. "First, let's celebrate the victory. I brought wine from my secret stash." "Yes, sir." The servants had been told to leave and they are the only ones in the room. Guildenstein sloppily poured the wine into a glass and slid it over to Bogan. Guildenstein is infamous, but he is an extremely practical person and hates useless formalities. Though he is royalty, he paid no care to how he poured the wine. Bogan took the glass and raised it as Guildenstein raised his. As Guildenstein took a sip, Bogan also sipped. It seems that the wine really is from Guildenstein's secret stash. It is a good wine with deep flavor. "You really are good at war. I did not think you could take a bite out of the Empire in the north in that situation. I was not mistaken to recommend you as a general. No, it is thanks to my excellent subordinates. Don't be humble. I've seen plenty of your work in the past. There was a great war 15 years ago. Guildenstein had gathered a large army and attacked the Empire's western lands. At that time, Wolfenite was the border between the kingdom and the Empire. The expanded territory beyond that is due to Guildenstein's achievements. Despite his poor conduct, Guildenstein is far from incompetent. In fact, he is extremely capable and befitting of royalty. At that time Bogan was a corps commander and Guildenstein promoted Bogan to general for his achievements in that war. They talked for a while about the recent war. It seems Guildenstein had already obtained a certain amount of information and knew how the situation developed so well it is like he was on the battlefield. Guildenstein's information network extends deep within other countries. It is terrifying how he knows what would normally be impossible for him to find out, but Bogan also knows that Guildenstein would only use that information for one purpose. Guildenstein is an unparalleled battle junkie. He simply values Bogan highly as a soldier. Guildenstein has an almost childish desire for battlefield stories, and regardless of his other aspects, Bogan likes this part of him. Guildenstein is infamous and the rumors are likely true, but when interacting with him in person, Bogan could not bring himself to dislike Guildenstein. But still, the two beautiful princesses. The rumors have reached the palace. Seems like they're quite amazing. Thank you. I can confidently say that both of them are more talented than I am. One day, they will definitely become new pillars of support for the kingdom. To that extent. Well, if you say so, it's probably true. Guildenstein chuckled as he stared at his wine. I'm sorry. The capital was quite slow because of the quarreling. I know the burden on you and Garka was quite heavy. Too many people are against me leading the Central Army right now. The conflict over the throne. If Guildenstein, the leader of one faction, has control of the army, he could easily seize the throne by force. It is an obvious concern, and in the end, the neutral Western general, Hilkintos, lead the Central Army. The Central General is also deeply involved in the kingdom's politics and could not be used for the same reason as Guildenstein. So it took time for Hilkintos to arrive and get the army in order. The struggle on the front lines is simply due to politics. If Guildenstein could have led the Central Army to the war immediately, Wolfenite would not have fallen. With the time Bogan has spent on the battlefield, he could not help but detest the world of politics. Well, leave that aside for now. I have something to tell you that will affect how you act in the future. How I act. It's about Kreschenta. Guildenstein grinned. I don't know what you've heard. Probably something along the lines of my brother not liking the idea of me inheriting the throne because of my bad conduct, and so he nominated Kreschenta. Well, I won't deny that, it's the truth. Guildenstein swirled the wine in the glass as he spoke, still grinning. I did not mind that at first. Does that mean you did not want to throne? Yeah, I didn't. I'll not defend myself. It's the truth that I enjoy such entertainment. I also went too far when I was young. They say I've settled down recently, but that's only because I've done everything and gotten sick of it. My nature has not changed. Bogan did not show any emotion, but his expression was slightly stiff. Guildenstein laughed humorously as he saw that. Archduke of the Kingdom, I'm quite all right with that rank. It's not like there's anything I can't do if I wanted to with that rank. In fact, the throne is just worse since I'll have to do a bunch of pointless chores. I like war, but I hate political fighting. I don't have any problems with handing over the throne to someone else. Guildenstein drained his glass and poured more wine, then continued speaking as he swirled the glass. But the problem is that someone. You should have seen Kreschenta before. What did you think? A young, but intelligent and beautiful person. A beautiful princess with shiny strawberry blonde hair, a fairy-like princess. Bogan had only seen her at a distance and never spoke to her directly, but he clearly remembers the way she carried herself in a confident, but refined manner. The last time he had seen her, she was 9. Wonderful. Exactly that, intelligent and beautiful. A gentle and kind person, slightly tomboyish but still elegant as if born to be a queen. But my concern is that that thing is a monster. What does that mean? Exactly what I said, Bogan. You must have heard the rumors of me making slaves kill each other for no reason, of me confining a noble's daughter then casting her aside. It is the truth that I have played around by toying with people. But it's because I've played like this, I know humans well, and I know a monster when I see one. Guildenstein ran a finger along the table, drawing an invisible line. The royal family has a long history. It almost went extinct, then revived many times. Many wise and many foolish rulers have been born. But this long history is built upon a tradition. Any child that behaves abnormally from birth is to be killed, for it is a cursed child. Kreschenta was supposed to be one of those children. Cursed child. An absurd royal tradition. I think it is ridiculous, but my brother is stubborn. He tried to follow that tradition. My brother had problems with infertility, so when the first child was finally born, he took quite a while to make the decision, but in the end he banished it and had it killed in secret. Bogan frowned. The concubine that gave birth to it was a particular favorite of my brother's, so those steps were necessary. Either way, she never met her daughter after giving birth to her, and the daughter was effectively imprisoned after that, so she was probably happier that way. What? Then the second child was born soon after that. And it was another cursed child. Can cursed children be identified at a glance? Bogan had also struggled with infertility and could no longer endure the question. A baby that does not cry. Though I believe it's up to the baby to cry or stay quiet. A baby that does not cry. But it was an unfounded concern, and that baby was brought up as the princess. Cuckoo, it would be better to say that it immediately learned to cry. Guildenstein was smiling, but his eyes were not. The concubine died of puerperal fever after hearing that she had given birth to another cursed child. It must have been too much after what happened to her previous daughter. My brother grieved and asked many times if it really was a cursed child. The servants did their best to make the cursed child cry. In the end, the cursed child learnt to cry and survived. I went to see it once to celebrate the birth, Guildenstern continued. It was just like any other baby. It threw tantrums and cried. I was disappointed since I had heard that it was a cursed child, but it seemed like a perfectly normal baby. But something weighed on my mind. The eyes were different. Eyes. An act. Bogan. That thing was able to act when it was a baby. Though at that time I only felt that something was off, it was quite a while before I realized it. It's the ideal princess, Guildenstern said, still grinning. It makes selfish demands occasionally, loves flowers, reads books, admires fairy tales. It does not excel in any particular field, but is not poor at anything either. But this is all its act. That thing is smarter and sees things more clearly than anyone else. It knows how others see it. It is simply acting in accordance to what others wish for. With all due respect, but it's not my imagination. I can tell. All of my brother's children born after that have died. The cause of death varies, but there have also been other suspicious deaths in the palace, and I was almost killed too. Your Highness was surprised, right? Guildenstern's mouth was still twisted in a grin, but his eyes were dead serious. I do not sleep with women. If I did, they could kill me in my sleep. He said that casually. That day, something had put me in a good mood and I called for a woman. I was in the mood to break out my special wine, but when we got to my room, that wine and a glass was already prepared. There were even fruits and a sharpened knife, and I was thinking about praising the considerate servant who prepared these later. But that day, I fell asleep next to that woman for some reason. There must have been sleeping drugs mixed in the wine or in the glass. The sharpened knife was for the woman to kill me. It was definitely a situation where the woman could have easily killed me if she wanted to. Guildenstern's eyes narrowed as he recalled that night. The smile had disappeared from his face. I was not killed only because on that day, I happened to call a woman I treated normally. If I had called for another woman, I would definitely be dead. I am very well aware of how much I am hated. Bogan stroked his chin, thinking for a moment. But, just because of that. That is enough. All servants said they did not prepare those things. Kreschenta also happened to be staying in that building to recover from some flu. I had a premonition. I asked around and found out that Kreschenta had apparently demanded wine earlier that day, so the servants had guided it to my wine cellar. They even pointed out which wines were part of my prized collection so that it would not drink those. The royal prince stared at his wine as he spoke. That was when it clicked. That was when I realized that was how Kreschenta had been getting things to work in its favor. It never showed any signs of it, using methods where it would never be suspected, and removed everything in between her and the throne. Guildenstern traced the rim of the wine bottle. My brother's illness is probably Kreschenta's doing too. They say it's an unknown illness but has been poisoned. Nobody suspects Kreschenta. My brother dotes on that thing, as do the fools around them. They haven't noticed a thing. But, well, you won't believe it just 'cause I said it. That's the kind of person you are. I simply told you this as thanks for what you did in the war. It's a reward. Like I said, this is for you to think about how you act in the future, Guildenstern continued as he watched Bogan's dubious expression. I'm not saying to join me. You are a man that we need to keep fighting for the kingdom for much longer. I just want to tell you not to get involved in the political strife happening in the palace. Bogan is not the type to get involved. So why did Guildenstern tell Bogan this? Bogan did not know. I simply think of myself as a sword. That's fine. In fact, although it's true that thing is abnormal, it might also become an extraordinary ruler. In that case, I would stay the same as now and you would still be the kingdom's sword. Even if I won, it would be the same. There was no sign of malice in Guildenstern's grin. But then his refined features turned serious as he looked Bogan in the eye. You cannot be replaced even with your weight in gold. As long as I live, I can't have you losing your life in such pointless squabbles. Remember this. Thank you. Guildenstern brought the glass to his lips and drained it. He did not pour a new glass. Bogan also finished his wine. This is the signal that their talk is done. Guildenstern prepared to leave immediately. That is the kind of man he is, quick and efficient. Bogan felt that this is this man's strength. Be very careful. Kreschenta is merciless if you get in its way. Whether you believe me or not, remember what I said, do not be fooled by appearances. I am grateful for your warning. Bogan stood and bowed his head deeply. Guildenstern waved a hand and picked up his cloak. Bogan took the lead and opened the door, escorting Guildenstern down the hallway towards the entranceway. That was when they heard voices. That was good hot water, Kreschenta. Yes, very nice. Kreschenta and Berry came up the stairs, snuggled close together. Their thin negligées were hidden under blankets wrapped around their bodies. They caught sight of Bogan and Guildenstern and stepped to one side, bowing their heads. Bogan was impressed by their synchronized movements while Guildenstern enjoyed the glimpse of Berry's chest from under the blanket. Then his eyes landed on Kreschenta. My adopted daughter Kreschenta and servant Berry. I see, raise your heads. The two did as they were told and raised their heads. Although Guildenstern had been lusting over Berry's cleavage before, he now stared at Kreschenta. Kreschenta stared back with a curious look. Adopted. Bogan, where was she from? Karka, a village in the north. Guildenstern's brow furrowed as he seemed to think for a moment. Kreschenta glanced up at Berry, wanting to quickly return to their room, but then turned as she heard noisy footsteps. A servant with black hair in a bun trotted over from the bath on the first floor. It was Anne, and has not been able to do her job as a servant at all. This time, she had raised her spirits and followed them into the bath to help them bathe, but Berry had taken care of everything for Kreschenta. So she thought to help Berry, but then Kreschenta was stuck to Berry and started washing Berry. There was no chance for Anne to step in. They had finished washing themselves as Anne was still at a loss. Then Berry had shyly recommended that Anne also relax and bathe. So Anne also washed herself, but she was late. The two were stepping out of the bath by the time Anne finished washing herself, but Kreschenta said that her body would not be properly warmed up if she did not enjoy the hot water, so Anne had to stay in the bath. And had breathed a sigh and relaxed, blushing as she recalled how they had looked like they were flirting. They were, as they washed each other. She completely forgot her job and enjoyed the bath. By the time she remembered and hurriedly got out, the two of them had already gotten dressed. Berry smiled wryly and told Anne not to rush, but Anne is a serious worker. She hastily put on her apron dress and rushed out with her hair still dripping. I will prepare tea, oh. And she tripped dramatically. The four watching her froze. Anne quickly bounced back onto her feet and bowed her head, shouting an apology. Berry smiled wryly while Kreschenta also showed a soft smile as she looked at Berry. Was it my imagination? Guildenstern muttered when he saw Krish's expression. They're as beautiful as I've heard. It's a shame they're your daughter and servant. You jest. Berry stiffened a little and Kreschenta frowned. Guildenstern laughed, enjoying their reactions. Loyalty cannot be bought with money. It was just a joke. Don't take it seriously. Yes, sir. I'll be leaving, Bogan. I look forward to seeing your other daughter at the ceremony. Guildenstern glanced at the dazed and as he walked by and said to Bogan at his side. She seems dumb. Say it if you don't like the servants here. Replacements will be sent immediately. And froze. Chapter 33, Feigned Illness. Servant and might have seen something. The day after the Kreskentans arrived, Anne's colleague who was supposed to be in charge of Berry called out to Anne. Anne, has Argansama been with Kreschenta the entire time? Yes. She is taking care of Kreschenta since Kreschenta seems to have a bit of a fever. She seemed to be tired from the long journey, and recalled yesterday's happenings and blushed as she explained. They had enjoyed tea after their bath and it was the time when they would usually go to bed. But Kreschenta refused to let go of Berry. Kreschenta wanted to stay with Berry, so she asked about the identity of the person just now, about how many people will come to the ceremony, questions about things she had not cared about just to keep Berry there. Kreschenta believed she was being subtle, and was desperate to make up for the failure of tripping in front of a guest. This along with her overly serious attitude prevented Anne from realizing, but of course Berry could see through Krish's intentions and that made it hard for Berry to leave. Kreschenta snuggled up to Berry, enduring her sleepiness while Berry glanced towards Anne with a slightly troubled expression. Anne was doing her best to ignore their actions, just doing her job seriously and answering questions that were not even asked. Anne could not afford to make any more mistakes and was too tense to fantasize about them even though they were clearly too close to each other. Berry thought about what to do as she watched, and at this rate, she would not be able to leave until Kreschenta could no longer endure it and dozes off, and would also remain tense and cannot rest until then. Berry came up with a plan and placed a hand on Krish's forehead. I was thinking, but Krish-sama is a little feverish. Kreschenta tilted her head in confusion. She had not felt anything off about her body except her sleepiness. Berry quickly whispered to her, "Work with me." Kreschenta nodded. Kreschenta might be a little feverish. Feverish? Yes, we just had a long journey in the carriage and Krish-sama, her body is not very strong so. Berry lied to the serious Anne. Berry is confident in her acting, but she is not used to lying. And this is for the sake of sleeping together with Kreschenta, a completely selfish reason, so the shame and nervousness made her falter a little. Her expression was worried, but her eyes were wandering and her cheeks were slightly flushed. That is not good. I will call for a doctor. It is okay, this is normal. In fact, it would be worse to make a big deal of it, so. Okay, this is normal. Anne panicked a little and Berry also responded in a panic. Kreschenta was doing her best to match Berry, but she did not know Berry's intentions and was not acting at all, not that the other two were in any state to notice. Anne's rich imagination helped her understand Krish's circumstances. Having a weak constitution is not good for noble women who have to give birth to heirs. Such a reputation would limit marriage options. Kreschenta is slender and her skin is pale. Now that Anne looked at her that way, she does look like a sickly sheltered lady. This might also be why her mental age seems a little young. She must have grown up spending most of her time indoors. But because she is part of a military family, she desperately trained and desperately fought on the battlefield with her young and weak body, shaving away at her own life to achieve those feats. Anne's eyes teared up. Today, I will be resting here to take care of her. Okay, understood. Berry sticking so close to her is also probably because she is worried about her Oju-sama pushing herself too far with her weak body. There was something about the way they washed each other in the bath that is hard to put into words. The sight of two young, beautiful women naked and washing each other felt immoral and made Anne imagine a relationship beyond just a lady and her servant. Especially with how they naturally sat shoulder to shoulder in the bath, their heads close together as they whispered to each other. But, this is all because of Krish's weak constitution. This would also explain why Berry spends all her time with Kreschenta instead of the actual daughter, Celine. While her respect for Berry as a model servant grew, and also wanted to punch herself for having such shameful fantasies. Come, Krish-sama, it is time for bed. Okay. Kreschenta finally understood Berry's intentions and buried her face in Berry's chest, hiding her smile, as Berry lifted Kreschenta in her arms. Kreschenta is in high spirits with no sign of illness, but Anne could not see this. Instead Anne thought that Kreschenta must feel unwell often as she watched Berry carry Kreschenta with practiced motions. And absent-mindedly wondered when the last time she had been carried like that while bowing, deeply impressed by the strong and healthy, from Anne's perspective, bond between them. If you need anything, please pull the cord by the bed. It is connected to a bell in my room. Thank you very much. Berry was confused by Anne's sudden brisk movements, but stopped herself from saying too much as she lowered Kreschenta onto the bed. Berry got onto the bed too as Kreschenta happily pulled on Berry's hand, her cheeks reddening. As for Anne, I really respect you. Good night. She quickly left the room after saying that and extinguishing the lights. How did that conversation lead to respect? Berry tilted her head in confusion, but turned to Kreschenta for now. Berry tried to look angry, but quickly gave up as Kreschenta happily hugged her. Berry is soft on Kreschenta, and when Kreschenta depends on her, Berry cannot bring herself to be strict and becomes even softer on Kreschenta. This is only for today. Love you, Berry. Chew. Kreschenta pressed her lips to Berry's, making Berry blush and wonder if she herself just wanted to sleep together with Kreschenta as she also embraced Kreschenta. Any resistance to kissing is already long gone. Tomorrow, Kreschenta might be feverish again. You. Kreschenta stared up at Berry with begging, expectant eyes. Berry knows she is too soft on Kreschenta, but it is already too late. Berry. Mew. Berry shook off her weird thoughts and sealed Krish's lips, then embarrassedly replied good night. And explained concisely without the fantasies. Her colleague nodded in understanding after hearing Anne's explanation. I see. Well, she certainly does not look to be very healthy, but still, if I could get that beauty for the price of a healthy body, I would also. That's rude. You should not say that even as a joke. I know, don't shout so early in the morning. Then I will be going to help out in the kitchen. They will be together today too, right? Yes, I will take good care of the two of them. Will you be all right? Well, just don't make any mistakes in my place. Anne's colleague waved a hand as she descended to the first floor, and took a deep breath and stood in front of the door. She must show a new self today. She is different from yesterday. Today, and is reborn. And prepared herself mentally and quietly opened the door. Fufu, it is morning, Kreschenta. Good morning. It looks like Berry has just woke Kreschenta. Seems like Berry had not gotten dressed yet because Kreschenta is still clinging to Berry. Berry is dressed in a negligee and sitting up with her back towards Anne, so only the upper half of her womanly figure was visible to Anne. But the curve of her hip is sexy and Anne could also see Krish's hand cling to Berry's back as she pulled herself up. Then Anne froze. In one natural motion, it looked like their faces had overlapped. Come on. Kreschenta really is bad at getting up. Are you really awake? Kreschenta is okay. Berry was acting much too normal for someone who has just been kissed. Krish's voice is also really sleepy. Their natural atmosphere made and come to her own conclusion. Berry must have been taking a closer look at Krish's face. Berry was just looking at her face to check how she is feeling. And had just vowed to be reborn just now. What is she thinking of now? And shook her head and berated herself. And since they are awake, it is rude to enter without knocking. With that thought, and shut the door as carefully as she had opened it. Krish's sharp senses noticed and closing the door, she had also been aware that they had not been alone, but she feigned ignorance since Berry had not noticed. Kreschenta generally obeys rules, but the rule here is a vague one that they must be alone together. Kreschenta interpreted the rule in a convenient way, and had not entered the room so they were alone together in the room, so that kiss was safe. Kreschenta knows the correct meaning behind Berry's rule of being alone together basically. They must not be seen by others, but this is a grey zone. Kreschenta is a creature that uses her great intelligence to fulfill her basic desires. She would usually choose to interpret things in a way convenient for her. And Kreschenta likes kissing. Berry also likes kissing. Kreschenta also has the perfect, to Kreschenta, argument to back herself up. The ideal relationship is one where they make each other happy. These are the words of Berry and Grace. Berry, today, take care of me again. Oh, but Kreschenta seems very lively today. Kreschenta froze, feeling like the ladder had suddenly been pulled out from under her, but Berry laughed gently. But Kreschenta works too hard. If Kreschenta gets dressed and does your best to keep your promise today, Kreschenta might get a fever again from working too hard. Then, Kreschenta will try her best. Yes. Please do your best. Berry smiled and kissed her brow, ignorant of their interaction, and headed to the kitchen to prepare tea. She was praised by her colleague in the kitchen for her forward thinking as she carried the teapot on a tray and went to knock on their door. A gentle voice granted permission, and when Anne opened the door, she saw Berry just about to head to the teapot to brew tea. They had already gotten dressed. Berry stopped as she saw Anne and bowed her head. Thank you very much, Anne-sama. No need to thank me, please, have a seat. Berry's mannerisms seems more beautiful the more Anne watches her. Even how she sits is beautiful. Kreschenta also sat on the same sofa. Her condition seems to be a lot better today. Do you feel better now? Anne smiled as she asked, but it seemed like Kreschenta stiffened for an instant. Berry smiled wryly and answered, A little. Let's see, for now, I will stay with her during our stay just in case. For some reason, Berry's smile towards Kreschenta looked impish. But it was also a strangely sweet smile that made Anne want to sigh. It would be bad if her condition worsens again. Right, Kreschenta? Yes. Kreschenta was lightly holding onto Berry's sleeve and seemed to be hiding her face as she answered, but her face seemed to be a little red. She might be feeling ashamed about her weak body, and interpreted it positively and thought that Kreschenta is an admirable and earnest person. They then talked a little until it was time for breakfast. Anne was guiding them to the dining hall when a beautiful blonde girl Celine stepped out of her room. Good morning, Celine-sama. Morning. Berry and Kreschenta too. Did you sleep well? As Celine stopped, Anne's colleague attached to Celine signaled to Anne with her eyes to take care of this, then headed towards the dining hall first. Kreschenta and Berry also greeted Celine and nodded. Celine is a girl who exemplifies what a noble is. Refined, beautiful, but not unpleasant. I can never become like her, thought Anne, then remembered that she should inform Celine. Last night, Kreschenta was not feeling well. Kreschenta. Celine looked at Kreschenta. Krish's eyes wandered. Celine frowned and looked at Berry. Berry averted her eyes. Kreschenta and Berry's expression seemed a little stiff. Celine's expression looked angry for an instant, but it quickly became a nice smile when Anne's gaze turned towards her. Her eyes did not look like they were smiling, but it might be Anne's imagination. Berry, did you take good care of Kreschenta? Why, yes, Oju-sama. Just in case, Berry-sama will be watching over Kreschenta during their stay, and has the flaw of not being able to pick up on the mood and added on to Berry's words. Celine's smile grew deeper, like a wolf baring its fangs. I see, yeah, her health is important. Kreschenta works too hard and is very bad at depending on others, right? Berry, having you take very proper care of her is really a great help. You are a great servant. Ahaha. Celine slowly drew closer as she spoke, but Berry avoided her eyes. At this point, even Anne felt that something was off. The atmosphere is extremely thorny. Celine twisted around and cocked her head as she turned her gaze to Kreschenta. But, Kreschenta, we are not at home. Falling ill and having to be taken care of when we are outside is very embarrassing. Berry is really, extremely, helplessly kind, so she will spoil you, but, do you understand what I mean? Oh my, you really do not seem to be feeling well. Let me take a good look at your face. You. Celine placed her hands on Krish's cheeks and pulled. Rather than checking on her, it looked more like she was pulling Krish's cheeks. No, not looks like. She is clearly pulling on Krish's cheeks. Poor thing, it must have been so painful that you could not bear it. You promised me that you would behave like a proper lady here, but it was so bad that you had to break that promise the instant we arrived. Phew, fury, Ehai. Oh my, it hurts. My heart also aches hearing that Kreschenta was feeling unwell. Come on, tell me. Did I ask for something that difficult? You could not endure it for just 2-3 days? I'm showy. Krish's snow-white cheek was being stretched to its limit by Celine, and quickly stepped in to stop Celine. Kreschenta looks like she was about to burst into tears at any moment. Celine-sama, that should be enough. That was embarrassing. I'm sorry. Could you go ahead and tell them we will be slightly late for breakfast? Her tone did not allow any objection. She was smiling, but her eyes were not. Terrified, and could only say understood, and watch as Celine grabbed Berry and Krish's hands and dragged them into her room, still smiling. Then in contrast with that smile, the door slammed shut violently, and could only wonder what was going on, but she has work to do. And turned away from the door and headed towards the stairs when, you idiots, can't you just endure it a little? Berry, you too. Didn't you also agree that just spoiling this child is not good for her? Don't you know that each and every one of your actions affects Otu-sama's reputation? And jumped as she heard Celine shouting at them. A sickly younger sister and her kind servant. And a responsible but strict older sister that scolds them for their weakness. That is the image built up in Anne's mind. Chapter 34, Conferring of Decorations. The day of the ceremony. Kreschenta was sat on a chair in between Celine and Berry, who are facing off. Celine's vibrant blue and white dress contrasted Krish's black and red dress. Celine glared at Berry as she pointed at her own hair, done in a left-side ponytail at a sword hairpin. Like I said, it has to be a sword. Oju-sama really does not understand. It has to be a flower. How many times do I have to say this? Kreschenta is participating in a ceremony to be conferred the title of Senior Knight. So this sword hairpin is more suitable for the ceremony. I even planned for our dresses and hairstyles to match. Kreschenta should use the same hairpin as me. Krish's hair had been done up in a side ponytail on the right. The opposite of Celine, which was the intention behind this hairstyle, but Celine and Berry are now arguing over which hairpin to use. Up until that point, they had harmoniously worked together to make Celine and Kreschenta match, but once it came to choosing the hairpin, their opinions differed. Celine wants to focus on elegance and style. Berry wants to focus on cuteness and beauty. And Kreschenta does not care, she just wants to eat breakfast. And watched helplessly while Kreschenta hung her head, pressing on her stomach to endure her hunger. To Kreschenta, breakfast is especially important, but it has been ignored by the other two because of the extremely important debate of which hairpin to use. For Kreschenta, all meals are important, but breakfast is the most important among them. After waking from a nice warm night of sleep while hugging Berry, it is natural that she will be hungry. This morning Kreschenta had woken up and flirted with Berry, then had to go through a hard schedule of bathing, makeup, hair arrangement and changing into a dress all in the morning. This might have been fine back in the village, but after Kreschenta moved to the estate, she developed the habit of pre-breakfast, snacking on leftovers in the kitchen as she made breakfast. So for Kreschenta, going through all this without breakfast is unimaginably tough. She endured it all with strong self-control, for Kreschenta, yet she ended up in this situation. Kreschenta had felt something unsettling about Celine and Berry's exchange and spoken up. They already prepared breakfast for us. It would be rude to let it go cold. The hairpin can be decided after eating, but Celine brushed her aside and instead lectured her about how important today is. You really don't think about anything but eating, aren't you embarrassed? You're a gluttonous spoiled kid, carefree and stupid. Can't you just do things properly once in a while? If you have the time to talk about that, how about thinking about this yourself? In the first place, Kreschenta learnt that her breakfast would only be further delayed by these lectures, so she could only stay quiet and hold her stomach, blending into the background. Berry smiled gently and said she would warm up the food later, so endure for now, but this also implied that this debate is more important than breakfast for Berry. That is simply Oju-sama's preferences. If Oju-sama wants a pear look, then the opposite of the sword would be a flower that is meant to be protected. It is because of Oju-sama's sword that the flower hairpin will look good, and it is only with Kresch-sama's flower that Oju-sama's sword will truly shine. Was that not the intention between choosing the black and red dress to contrast with Oju-sama's blue and white dress? I already said that the dress is enough for that. It's because the dress already creates a large contrast that we should use the same hairpin since we are both becoming senior knights. Celine glared back. And I'm also the one giving in most of the time. I even gave in and allowed you to spoil Kreschenta so much this time. How about you give in once in a while? Oh my, now that Oju-sama is stumped, Oju-sama brings up a different topic. Personal insults last time and now this. And though Oju-sama says that Oju-sama allowed it, Oju-sama complains about it every time we meet. I have also reflected on my actions and will quietly listen to those complaints, but I have to object when Oju-sama brings it up when it is unrelated. You have to. So what about a few complaints? Think about my position. Of course I'd want to make a complaint or two. And you're all talk, despite what you say, you still spoil Kreschenta. What reflection? What a joke. Neither gave way, scowling at each other with sharp eyes. Kreschenta watched them with sad eyes. Even though Oju-sama says that, if Oju-sama were in my position, Oju-sama would definitely do the same. If Oju-sama says to think about Oju-sama's position, how about Oju-sama try standing in my shoes? In the end Oju-sama also accepts Kresch-sama's key. Berry cut herself off, glanced at Anne and cleared her throat. Anyway, Oju-sama could not say anything either. That's because you taught her weird things. That's not my fault. I see, so everything is my fault. When it is convenient for Ojusama, Ojusama says that Ojusama gave in, but when it is inconvenient it is the other person's fault. That is Ojusama's thinking. That is the real joke here. What did you? Both of you, how about RM, asking Kreschenta herself, and interrupted their argument, but her voice was shrill. She could not endure how pitiful Kreschenta looked caught between them and spoke up, but, Kreschenta, Kreschenta, is fine with either. Quickly learnt that it only made things worse. Both. Kreschenta, do you understand that it is because you can't even choose a hairpin yourself that I have to go through this fruitless argument with Berry? Were you even listening? You don't understand at all, do you? Decide right now. Of course it's the sword, right? Kreschenta, it is okay to be honest. There is no need to be considerate of Ojusama. This is for Kreschenta. Come, please say it, the flower is better. Kreschenta really did not care either way but was crushed by their pressure. She could only look at the door in desperation. And as if he heard her plea, her savior appeared right at that moment. I came to check since you all didn't come for breakfast, but what are you two fighting over this time? Bogan seemed to have expected this and tiredly massaged his brow as he silently listened to their explanation. They can just go with the sword and flower, but change the color of the flower. From Krish's perspective, the sight of Bogan convincing them to accept this compromise is truly that of a savior, a hero. Kreschenta breathed a sigh of relief at the arrival of a mediator and smiled. She can finally eat breakfast, but the voice that stopped her was Bogan's yet again. It is about time for us to go. Seems like the ceremony was brought forward a little. Okay, Otusama. Kreschenta froze. The interior of the royal palace is built more like an extremely large estate than a castle. It is not meant to be a defensive stronghold, instead it is designed for bureaucracy and for royalty to live in, prioritizing the size and number of rooms with no complicated maze of corridors. This is the center of the kingdom. This castle was built as a symbol of the king's power. It was not built with enemy attacks in mind in the first place. Thus the castle is weak in the case of a siege, but on the other hand, it is extremely comfortable to live in. The corridors are long and wide. Kreschenta, Celine, Bogan and Gallen are walking through such a corridor with Kristan's subordinates in tow. The southern General Garka and western General Hilkintos also accompanied them, making Kreschenta and Celine about to become senior knights. The lowest rank and their position is at the rear of the line. Come on, you can eat after the ceremony is over. Don't hang your head just because breakfast is delayed. You. What's with that look? Are you saying it's my fault? No. They had stood by in a waiting room for a while after entering the palace and are now on their way to the throne room. Celine muttered softly to Kreschenta as they walked through the long corridor. The ceremony is not that long and since it has been brought forward, it will be finished long before noon. Breakfast is only delayed a little, but this is major damage to Kreschenta. Come on, we are almost there. Pull yourself together. Okay. They arrived at large doors that reached the tall ceiling. The heavy double doors were slowly opened by guards. They proceeded inside. The sounds of drums and trumpets filled the air as they stepped into a white hall. A brilliant red carpet passed through the middle of countless pillars supporting a ceiling that is so high you had to look up to see it. At the end of the carpet is a small dais and a single throne. A man wearing a crown sat upon it. Next to him stood the royal prince and princess. Everyone else stood at the sides of the carpet. This red carpet is also known as the King's Road. Red is the color of blood and it represents all the blood the kingdom has lost. The royal family's reign is supported by that blood and normally only those related to the royal family can step on this carpet, but during ceremonies and audiences with the king others are temporarily allowed to stand upon it. This represents their involvement with royal blood and permission to share the support of that blood. Thus anyone allowed to step upon this carpet, even if they were commoners, are granted the honorable title of nobility. Bogan has been here many times before and his stride is confident, similarly for the generals walking at his side Garka and Hilkintos. This is also the same for the corps commanders, but the further down the line, more nervous people are visible. Celine is also one of them, and Kreschenta could see out of the corner of her eye that Celine's expression was slightly stiff. Everyone around them are men, making the two of them stand out. This made the surrounding eyes gather on them, and Celine's legs felt shaky. Next to her, Kreschenta is just as normal without a hint of nervousness. Celine wanted to pinch Krish's cheek and tell her to at least be a little tense, but she cannot do that here. Celine focused on Galen's back instead, walking confidently in front of them, and quietly calmed her breathing. Once they reached the middle, they split into two lines, leaving a gap along the middle of the carpet. Then from the front, they knelt on one knee and bowed their heads, putting their right fist in their left palm above their heads. Kreschenta and Celine are wearing dresses and would usually be allowed to simply bend their knees a little and pretend to kneel, but remain standing, even in front of royalty. But this is a ceremony, so they also knelt after the person in front of them knelt. The drums and trumpets stopped and silence filled the air for a few moments. Then the royal Prince Guildenstein stepped forward. First, we want to thank you all for preventing the evil empire's invasion and saving the kingdom from its predicament by defeating their large force of 10,000 famed generals and heroes that will leave their names in history, as well as nameless soldiers and citizens have spilled their blood for the kingdom. The royal family is built upon that blood. Your actions have made our ancestors proud and bring them honor. His Majesty the King will personally extol your achievements and grant you your title and rewards. Know that this is the greatest possible honor. He did not shout, nor did he use magic to project his voice. Yet his voice was majestic and clearly audible. Guildenstein has something that only those born to rule have. His voice is clear even in this wide space. General Carmaida was lost to the enemy's blades, along with the lives of many soldiers and citizens. They are now the blood of the kingdom. Many mourn their loss. But death is not the end. They will live on forever as new blood of the kingdom. His Majesty the King, me, all of you will eventually become part of the blood of the kingdom too. There is no need to mourn or grieve, simply accept it and rejoice that you survived to receive this honor. This is the best parting gift we can give to the dead. There were a few stifled sobs and sniffling at the rear of the line. Carmaida's subordinates. Not many have survived. These three generals have survived and defeated a large enemy force. Each of their contributions was magnificent. Among them, I want to specially mention General Kreschenta for his intelligence and valor in defeating the despiteful Sashanka who killed General Carmaida. Despite being stuck in a stalemate with inferior numbers, he tore through a force of 40,000 with an army half that size, throwing them into chaos in a manner befitting the name of Lightning Quick. Step forward. Yes, Your Highness. Bogan took a few steps forward and knelt again in the middle of the carpet. Without this man's contributions, we would not be in any state to conduct this ceremony right now. I am sure all of you are aware. Before your eyes is a hero. Guildenstein looked around. This man is a hero among heroes, the pride of the kingdom, General Bogan Argalit Vesrinia Kreschenta. Guildenstein spread his arms, and on that signal, the orchestra played their drums and trumpets as those lining the sides of the carpet cheered. Those on the carpet are also in the same position of being cheered, so they could not cheer, but Celine is visibly happy about the praise for her father. Kreschenta smiled at that, and Celine averted her eyes in embarrassment. Next, I would like to mention General Garka for stopping the enemy's main attack in the south, then defeating them when the chance presented itself due to Kristan's counterattack. Step forward. And the ceremony proceeded. In order from the front, they stepped in front of the king and were granted a sword by the king himself. A resplendently decorated jewel sword. Back when metals were precious, the sword was the symbol of a hero. Because of this history, rewards from the king are granted in the form of a sword. But of course this is not all. They will also be granted various other treasures later. It was announced that the territories of the three generals will be expanded, while Kristan's first corps commander, a man named Nozan, will be sent to empty eastern territories as the new general. Carmaida's son was also lost in battle, leaving the post empty, so due their contributions, the most skilled corps commander in the Kreschenta army was nominated. It was quite a while later before Celine and Krish's names were called. There are 7 of them, including Galen, that would be receiving the title of Senior Knight. Galen already holds the title of Junior Knight. The rank of Junior Knight can be granted by generals with the permission of the king. This is because of the formality that nobles must not be commanded by commoners. Galen had more than enough achievements to be promoted to senior knight in the last war, but he retired from the army before the conferring of decorations, so his rank is still junior knight. It is not good for appearances for a junior knight to shoulder the major role of the general's aide, so in consideration of his past achievements, he will also be receiving the title of senior knight together with Celine and Kreschenta. You are now allowed to call yourselves Rhynia. You have been granted the honorable title of Rhynia, meaning warrior in the old language. The title of senior knight is not granted without achievements on the battlefield, regardless of how noble the birth. You all have just received this title. Step forward in order and receive your swords. Kreschenta is at the corner and is last in line. Kreschenta Rhynia Kreschenta. She thought about her lengthened name as she waited for her turn. Celine went and came back. It is Krish's turn. She raised her head and stood up, then subconsciously reflexively stepped back. Krish's gaze had landed on the girl standing next to the king. She is a young girl half a head shorter than the petite Kreschenta. Her strawberry blonde hair shone red in the sunlight. Her white dress made her look like a fairy and her features strangely resembled Krish's. The princess had looked bored until just now, but was now staring at Kreschenta. Then she showed a brilliant smile. Kreschenta. Celine softly admonished Kreschenta and Kreschenta stepped forward. Kreschenta had responded because she had been on guard. Kreschenta is always paying attention to her surroundings for any signs of danger at all times. If she is in a crowd, she is always ready to escape if someone lunged at her, or even kill them first. It is almost a subconscious habit. The instant she had stood up, Kreschenta had felt danger and immediately stepped back. And the feeling had come from the direction of the princess. The smiling princess showed no hostility and she is at a distance where Kreschenta can kill her at any moment. Kreschenta erased her inner doubts and advanced to stand before the king. She then indifferently went through the ceremony without showing any further interest, receiving the sword with beautiful conduct from the king whose complexion was hidden by makeup. Kreschenta wants to quickly finish up and eat. That is the only thought in Krish's head. Chapter 35. Princess Kreschenta. The hall for the dinner party was so large that a whole estate could fit in it. The hall is so wide that it can host more than 1,000 and the ceiling is so high that you had to look straight up to see it. A wall of glass leads to the balcony, letting in the amber evening sunlight. The dinner party is buffet style with countless tables scattered around filled with just as many dishes. Just as Berry had said, a magnificent whole roast pig is still quite normal. There is a whole cow with its various parts cooked separately then pieced back together, a castle-shaped cake, a bird made of candy and various other extravagant dishes. The theme for this dinner party seems to be the kingdom's gods. The hall is separated into areas according to each of the 12 gods. For example, the area of Chosserine, the goddess of beauty, contains finely crafted dishes while the area of Coreus, the god of war, has extravagant beef dishes. The decorations also matched the theme. There is an area with gold ornaments while another is decorated with swords and shields along with the statues of the respective gods, making it fun to just look around. But Krish's objective is the food. Kreschenta held Berry's hand and wandered here and there. All she can eat. This is Krish's gold mine, but someone stood in her way yet again. Gahaha, I've heard the rumors that the other Kreschenta is also beautiful, but the rumors really are mere rumors. They do no justice to the real thing, and if your swordsmanship is as they say, then many soldiers are put to shame. The man was like a wild beast. A beard covered the area around his mouth and his black hair is slicked backwards, but his hair is so stiff that it looks more like it is standing up. His height is about 6 feet. Quite tall, but more than that, he is thick. That does not mean he is fat, it is all muscle. He looked hopelessly out of place in his formal attire. He looks more like a bandit pretending to be a noble. This man's name is Dagran Nakul Dugarinia Garka, the fierce general that defended the south and dealt the final blow to the Empire's invasion army. Despite his appearances, he was born to the old Garka family and is a duke, which means he ranks higher than Kreschenta, and it would be rude for Kreschenta to excuse herself. Kreschenta had just finished greeting each corps commander and was finally released. It was almost a full hour of them lavishing her with flowery praises of her achievements and other repeated talk about the war until Berry cut them off. Of course, Kreschenta has not been able to enjoy the food and has only had a few drinks. Just as she finished talking with the corps commanders and was about to enjoy the food, this bandit-like Daegrin appeared. A man just as loud as the second corps commander Kokis. Krish's expression looked a little annoyed and even Berry's smile was slightly troubled. As a servant, Berry is aware of who Kreschenta needs to speak to. It is simple manners to greet each corps commander, so Berry subtly guided Kreschenta towards them. But Berry believes that Kreschenta does not need to greet anyone else and subtly guided Kreschenta away from the other gazes on them so that Kreschenta could enjoy the food, but they could not avoid this man. He had pushed through the crowd and beelined straight to them. There is a silent agreement to only speak to those nearby during dinner parties like this. In the kingdom, stand-up buffets are considered informal. Anyone could enjoy a meal in the presence of royalty and speak to anyone else regardless of rank. Berry made use of that common sense to conduct herself and Kreschenta in such a skillful way that it is unbelievable that Berry is inexperienced with high society, but if someone ignores that common sense and homes in on them, there is no way for them to escape. Berry pondered over what to do as she watched Kreschenta, who is clearly thinking about nothing but food. After speaking with Bogan, I wanted to speak with you directly. You were the one that suggested the plan to lure Sashanka by shifting camp to the east, right? Yes, General Garka. That was an amazing read. You have good eyes. Even I wouldn't have thought of that in that situation. In fact, I couldn't do anything in the south and was only facing off with the enemy until Christ and broke Sashanka. Daegrin is in high spirits. Everything about him indicated that he really wants to talk about the war and Berry had already given up. This seems like it will drag on. The Christ and Corps commanders also more or less had the same air about them. The handsome First Corps commander, Nozen, praised Kreschenta for her brilliant mountain breakthrough and her skill in the melee afterwards. He was happy to become a general, but he owes a great debt to General Kreschenta and is worried about leaving a large hole in his forces. But with Selene Sama and Krish Sama present, the bear-like Second Corps commander, Kokis thanked Kreschenta for giving him a chance to play an active part. He also thanked her for rushing to aid the isolated Second Corps fighting in the west and striking the enemy in the rear, destroying their morale and making them retreat. If only his son could learn from her Gahaha. The eagle-eyed Third Corps commander, Toyuz, admired her skill in constructing the fort and told her how much easier it made things and helped them conserve their forces. He wanted to learn from how she built such an effective fort in that short period of time. If they met again at the training grounds, he would like to discuss more about it. Actually, now would be a good time. The skeletal Fourth Corps commander, Elruga, quietly praised her skill in infiltrating the mountains and said that their great victory is Krish's achievement. It is thanks to Krish's lead that they succeeded in flanking through the mountains with almost no casualties and had less than half the expected losses in the end. Despite his antisocial appearance, he seems to dote on his son and started talking about his son halfway through, saying that Krish Sama reminded him of his son and how his son is much better than him. All of them would have gone on and on if let be, so Berry had politely cut them off, but she cannot do anything here since Daegrin is of higher rank. Daegrin talked about the southern battlefield and explained his position to Kreschenta using cups and plates on a table. What do you think about this situation? Since this is on the plains, the Empire has the advantage with their nomadic cavalry. Krish's plan involved killing their mobility using the terrain, but that would be impossible in that area. Kreschenta would have pulled the army back instead. You would let them take the land? Kreschenta nodded and pointed at the representative map on the table. The enemy would not have gained anything from our tactical retreat. During the temporary stalemate, the villages and towns could have been evacuated and emptied. Just by luring out the enemy and making them extend their supply lines, we could have put great strain on them. This is because the Empire mostly relies on procuring their supplies locally. But would they have chased? In the early stages they would have, since their objective was to capture territory. It might become a little difficult during the stalemate later on, but if you retreated towards Wolfenite when Master was shifting to the east, the enemy would definitely give chase. The enemy saw Kristan's movement as a precursor to a recapture attempt on Wolfenite. If Daegrin's army had moved towards Wolfenite, the enemy would have definitely tried to stop it. If they chased, you could choose the battlefield, and by moving closer to Wolfenite, there were more advantageous areas like the forest or desert. Kreschenta would have chosen the desert here. Daegrin looked towards where Kreschenta pointed and frowned. She was pointing at a white patch of tablecloth. Naturally, there is no actual map on the table. But Kreschenta had accurately calculated and pointed at the location of the desert in the south based on the positions Daegrin described. Daegrin turned to her with a serious expression. You've memorized not just the northern and eastern geography, but the south too. Yes. I see. No wonder Kreschenta is all praises for you. I'd want you for myself too. I owe a debt to the master for taking me in, and it is all I can do to repay that debt right now. Kreschenta declined using the excuse Berry had taught her, word for word. Berry had told her to say this if anyone proposed to her, and Kreschenta dutifully obeyed. Gahaha, I see. That's a problem. But I owe a debt to you. Come to me if you ever need anything. Thank you very much. Kreschenta finally felt the end approaching and glanced towards Berry. Berry nodded back and was about to act, but Daegrin is a man of steel. Then next, and he started moving the glasses and plates again. Next. Yeah. You know what happened. I didn't move, and when I received the report that Kreschenta broke Sarshanka, I took the chance to attack. At that time my force was 30,000 and the enemy was 40,000. The battlefield was like this. In the end, Kreschenta was stuck with Daegrin for another half hour. Berry smiled wryly as she guided Kreschenta by the hand. Kreschenta looked like a dog that had been told to stay in front of treats. Kreschenta was finally released after the sun had set, and Berry guided her extremely well now. The way Berry exploited the chinks in people's awareness is similar to Kreschenta. But even in a hall full of noble women, Krish's beauty is eye-catching. They ate a little, moved to the next area, ate a little and on to the next again. It was quite rushed, and eventually Berry changed plans and they headed to the balcony. They found a quiet corner on the wide balcony, set the slightly inappropriate amount of food they had secured on a table and took a break. There are not many people around. Conversation is prioritized over food at stand-up buffets such as this one. Connections between nobles are formed on occasions like this, so nobles are busy looking for the connections that will bring them success in life, and there are many that do not even eat a single bite. Since there is no point in going to a place without the people they seek, not many come to the balcony and it is relatively quiet. The only people present are young couples or nobles having a serious discussion. People are sparse and it is peaceful. For nobles, appearances and reputation is everything. In the hall, there may be some that hit on them under the pretense of greeting them, but it would be bad for appearance to go all the way to the corner of a deserted area to speak to them. Unless they are acquaintances, such a sudden act would only be seen as hitting on them. Since they had already greeted those they have to speak to, they were able to enjoy a relatively peaceful time. This would not be possible for Celine, who has already appeared in high society before, but this is Krish's first time. Berry breathed a sigh of relief. They should be able to get through the rest of the day like this. There is a little too much spice on this one. Yes, that spice is rekra. Its strong fragrance is good for meat with a strong smell, like boar, but they made the wrong choice here. A waste of good meat. They were having a cooking review with their many dishes. They had made 2 trips, so they had their pick of dishes. The dishes they had brought first had gone a little cold, but the ingredients and cooking were good, so they still tasted fine. In fact, most people would have high praises for these dishes. But Kreschenta normally eats the home cooking of a culinary researcher, Berry. Kreschenta can enjoy just about anything when she is hungry, but her palate is extremely refined and she is able to discuss the subtle details of flavor with Berry. Kreschenta enjoys times like this with Berry the most. We should consider whole roasts. They are large and, Kreschenta blushed and cut herself off, but Berry just laughed softly. I will never make fun of Kreschenta's appetite. Kreschenta would love such a filling meal, right? You. But the seasoning and cooking is difficult. We can only make rough estimates with whole roasts. The whole roast chicken Berry made before was very delicious. Kreschenta said that a little shyly, making Berry smile happily. Chicken is still manageable, but a pig would be too much. I would still prefer to cook the parts separately. Kreschenta also prefers it that way. Empathy? Yes, empathy. Berry stroked Krish's cheek as she snuggled closer. Since her hair has been done up, Berry cannot pat her head. Kreschenta fidgeted, then glanced around, pouting as she saw the presence of other people. Berry smiled wryly as she inferred what Kreschenta wanted and pressed a finger to Krish's lips. Not here. Then, when we go back to our room. Maybe, Is that a no? Kreschenta looked at Berry with upturned eyes. Berry blushed and her eyes wandered, troubled by the quagmire she had gotten herself into. Do not hold back with me. If there is anything Kreschenta wants me to do, please speak out and tell me. Berry was the one that said that to Kreschenta. Those words came from her goodwill, her sense of responsibility and her love. She did not think it would lead to this. Kreschenta simply believed in those words, understood it in her own way and is depending on Berry. And that is what she has been doing for a while. It is already too late. Too late, too late. Yes, as Berry kept thinking it is already too late, it got worse and at some point it really became too late. At first, Berry had no doubts that her feelings for Kreschenta was that of a mother or an older sister, the pure love of a guardian. But now she is not so sure. In return, please endure until we go back to our room, okay? Okay, Kreschenta will endure until we are back in our room. Kreschenta is an exceptionally beautiful girl. Having such a girl dependent on her, kissing her every day and receiving such innocent love requires a lot more self-control than Berry had thought. And Berry is also aware that she is the one that brought up Kreschenta like this, so there is no one to blame but herself. Berry also knows that this is not all bad. It is due to this that Kreschenta acts much more like a normal girl than before. She has become much more charming, she smiles genuinely more often and seems happy. That is why Berry is at a deadlock and can only silently continue to endure the allure of this beautiful, adorable creature. Berry closed her eyes to compose herself, and when she opened them, Kreschenta was staring at something outside. Following her gaze, there was a single tower at the corner of Royal Land. Krish's gaze shifted from the tower to the area around it. Is something the matter? That seems familiar. Kreschenta was probably in that tower a long time ago. Tower. Berry frowned. A long time ago? Ah, yes, that is probably it. Kreschenta often looked outside from that small window over there. Berry took a closer look and found a single window at the top of the tower. A single tower standing in the back corner of Royal Land is strange, its purpose is unfathomable. It looks as if it was built away from the castle, a lonely tower, and what does Kreschenta mean by being there before? Berry's frown deepened. It was a long time ago. Kreschenta was really small, it was before Kreschenta was taken in by the village. Kreschenta never went outside, so Kreschenta does not remember anywhere else though. Kreschenta compared the scenery and flipped the image from her memories, confirming that they matched. Kreschenta quickly lost interest in why she had been there and stared at the unmoving Berry, tilting her head as she watched Berry lost in thought. That was when someone spoke to them. Oh, this is where you were. A young, but distinct voice. Are you looking at the tower? Her pale hair shone in the moonlight with a tinge of red. A beautiful, phantasmal, magical shine. A tiara sat on her hair which has been let down and appeared to be fluttering despite the lack of wind, while her amethyst eyes seemed to shine in the dark. Berry quickly bowed deeply at the waist and lowered her head. This is a person who Berry, a servant, has to show such respect for. Kreschenta lightly held up her dress and bowed her knees, curtsying elegantly. The girl seemed to be enjoying something as she watched them, then held up her own pure white dress and returned the curtsy. A curtsy that she did not need to return with her standing. She did not bow her head or show any other sign of respect. She simply stood there like an absolute ruler. That is who she is. Good evening. I am Kreschenta. Nice to meet you, Kreschenta. Kreschenta Fana Vieira Alberon. Alberon Kingdom's first princess smiled at them elegantly, with a face similar to Krish's. Chapter 36. The Baby That Does Not Cry. Baby that does not cry, cursed child. Those were the words repeatedly mentioned around her right after she was born. She did not know the meaning of those words and only heard them as sounds. Krish's first memory is of opening her eyes in a gloomy room. A bed and a single window. A bookshelf, table and chair. At regular intervals, 2 women came and fed her milk. They never said anything to Kreschenta, and Kreschenta did not say anything either. Kreschenta was breastfed when she got hungry and they cleaned up her waist. After a while, Kreschenta learnt to stand and became able to walk around the room. Around the same period, the woman that breastfed her no longer came and Kreschenta was given porridge with soft potato. She was taught how to eat and how to use a chamber pot. Though Kreschenta understood some words by then, she did not speak. She was not particularly dissatisfied with anything. No, there was the smell of dust and waste. Since the woman visited regularly, Kreschenta chose to use the chamber pot right before she came. Time passed. There were books, but Kreschenta could barely speak, never mind read. She could only stare out the window. The outside scenery was dominated by a white building. She stared blankly at flying creatures and watched as their birth and death. Kreschenta moved the floofy thing around her body. She counted the floorboards. She counted the number of stairs based on the footsteps she could hear. Aside from that, she just ate and slept. At some point, the frequency of calls of nature decreased and her hunger increased. The amount of food was no longer enough. That was the first time Kreschenta made a request and the woman looked at her dubiously. After many repeated attempts to signal that she was hungry and there is not enough food, the woman finally understood. Her expression was initially confused, but when she understood, she looked strangely sad. That was a slight change from the usual uneasy way she looked at Kreschenta. From now on, if there is not enough food, please tell me. The next time the woman came, she taught Kreschenta a few simple words. Thanks to her, Kreschenta learnt to understand simple words and became able to hold a simple conversation. But it seems like she was not allowed to talk to Kreschenta and she only taught Kreschenta the bare minimum. Though it was not allowed, conversing with words was a lot easier than signaling. The woman did not stop Kreschenta either. That rule was probably not that important. Though the woman did not speak to Kreschenta, she would answer when Kreschenta said something to her. The time the woman spent in the room gradually grew longer. She spent more time cleaning the room and it became cleaner. Since Kreschenta did not like dust, she got permission to help, and when Kreschenta helped, the woman patted her on the head. Kreschenta enjoyed that and she was bored. She did not have any problems with cleaning, and the more she helped, the more she got patted on the head, so Kreschenta happily helped. Stare blankly. Woman comes. Eat. Help. Pats. Kreschenta was satisfied with that life and it continued until the day the woman came with swollen eyes. Sorry, repeatedly apologizing, she wrapped Kreschenta in a cloth and carried her somewhere. Kreschenta could not see outside, but they probably got in a carriage. Kreschenta was not aware of that at the time. She only knew they spent a long time rocking in the carriage. Kreschenta and the woman were alone in the carriage. The woman gave Kreschenta her meals in the carriage. After a few days, the carriage stopped and Kreschenta and the woman entered a forest. The woman was holding a knife and she embraced Kreschenta for a while, trembling. Then she let go of Kreschenta, pulled up her skirt and cut her own leg. She let the blood stain the knife, then bound the wound with cloth. She then pointed in a direction and told Kreschenta to keep walking that way. The woman patted Kreschenta on the head, then just stood there. Kreschenta nodded and walked in the direction she was told to. The woman had treated Kreschenta well and Kreschenta did not doubt her. Kreschenta kept walking as she was told. She kept walking as her legs grew tired and her stomach grew empty, until she collapsed. Salba. There's a child. Don't be stupid, Gorka. There's no WA, you're serious. That's bad. We shouldn't get involved. It's probably some noble's abandoned child. But we can't just leave her here. Let's bring her back first, then we can decide what to do. These are Krish's memories before arriving in the village. She was asked many questions in the village, but she did not speak. Kreschenta laid in bed, weak from hunger and exhaustion. Listening to the villagers' conversations, she learnt that she was abandoned. She did not know why she was abandoned, but at that time she thought it was because she broke the rule of not speaking to the woman. The villagers also talked about Kreschenta being some noble and that they should throw her out if she really is some noble's abandoned child, making Kreschenta avoid speaking even more. Kreschenta cannot afford to be thrown out and chose to wait and see, observing the villagers. She was not able to speak much in the first place, so it was not that difficult to act. Eventually, she became Gorka and Grace's child and was given a name. People forgot about her origins. That is how Kreschenta became a member of the village and started living there. Although Kreschenta has these memories, she never recalled them. Kreschenta had no interest in those memories. She only recalled them because she saw that tower and the woman standing behind Kreschenta with a tense expression. She used to look to be in her late teens, but now she looks older. But she does not look that different and her face has not changed. Her hairstyle with her black hair gathered in a bun at the back of her head and her black and white apron dress are the same. Kreschenta hesitated on whether to greet her, then chose not to. It is a rule during this kind of events to not greet servants. Kreschenta stared at the woman, then looked at Kreschenta. Kreschenta is dressed in a relatively simple white dress, beautifully decorated with lace. The dress had gold embroidery and a silver necklace hung around her neck. Her large, upturned eyes looked up at Kreschenta. Nice to meet you. I am Kreschenta Kreschenta. Next to me is the Kreschenta family's servant, Berry Argan. Pleased to make your acquaintance, Your Highness. Kreschenta greeted Kreschenta with the standard greeting that Berry had taught her. Kreschenta giggled. That feels off. Call me Kreschenta. No need for Sama or the like. There is no one that can hear us anyway. Okay. Then, nice to meet you, Kreschenta. Kreschenta. Berry hastily called out when Kreschenta responded too obediently. Berry had not expected this situation and had not taught Kreschenta how to reply in this scenario. Yufufu, I do not mind, Argan-sama. Relax. Sama, is too much for me, Your Highness. It is a habit. Then I will make it an order. Do not mind it. Understood. Kreschenta stared at Kreschenta. She really seemed to be enjoying something. This is the first time we have met, but it does not feel like it. I have always wanted to meet you. Does Nora look familiar? Kreschenta pointed at the woman next to her at Nora. Kreschenta nodded. Yes, she took care of me when I was younger. Nora stiffened and Berry's eyes widened in surprise. Kreschenta is my Wani-sama. Since you two were talking as you looked at the tower, I had thought that Argan-sama also guessed that. That is. Indeed. From what I saw in the hall, Wani-sama seems to be very important to Argan-sama, so I trust Argan-sama will not spread this. Kreschenta. May I call you Wani-sama? Okay. Kreschenta nodded, completely unperturbed, making Kreschenta laugh. Kreschenta turned to Berry. That tower is where the royal family's cursed children are confined. They cannot be let out, but nobody wants them in the castle either. That is why that tower was built there, and Wani-sama used to live there, with Nora over here taking care of her. The woman called Nora glanced about uneasily, but Kreschenta ignored her and continued. Wani-sama, please keep it a secret that Wani-sama was in that tower. From what I have seen, it appears Wani-sama is not very familiar with palace politics, or even noble society as a whole. Yes, not really. The Kreschentas are nobles and serve as a general. The king is their patron and is very important. That is Krish's understanding of nobles, and she does not particularly care to know more. Of course Kreschenta had been taught the structure of noble society and has the knowledge, but her understanding of it is poor. Although she can explain the structure of noble society, she is completely ignorant of how to act in it and only does as Berry tells her to. Since Wani-sama is my Wani-sama, Wani-sama was originally Otu-sama's His Majesty, the king's daughter and the first princess. But because of certain circumstances, Wani-sama is not supposed to exist and there will be a lot of troublesome problems if this became known, so it is better to keep it a secret. Kreschenta did not beat about the bush, explaining the key points only. This direct explanation is very easy for Kreschenta to understand, and Kreschenta found it slightly curious that Kreschenta explained it this way although they had just met. Kreschenta saw Krish's questioning look and smiled. I am the same as Wani-sama. I like simple explanations. I am most likely the one person that can understand Wani-sama's feelings the most. Really? Yes. That is why I have always wanted to meet you. Because Wani-sama is also the one that will understand me the best. Kreschenta's cold, inhuman eyes seems to heat up. I believe that if we understand each other and seek the same thing, then we can obtain the only place in this world where we can relax. Relax. Yes, relax. A place where we are not threatened by anyone. I believe I can create such a place with Wani-sama. So will you stay with me forever? Kreschenta proposed. It has not even been a quarter hour since they had met. Berry looked at Kreschenta in confusion. It is hard to believe that the princess had just said that. Kreschenta briefly looked between Berry and Kreschenta before answering. NN. Kreschenta likes Krish's current home. Really? Kreschenta suddenly looked at Berry. She was smiling, but her eyes were inhuman, like a snake's. Strangely, Kreschenta was able to vaguely understand what Kreschenta was thinking. Kreschenta, no. If Kreschenta does that, Kreschenta will have to kill Kreschenta. That will be very troublesome for Kreschenta. Berry tensed, looking from Kreschenta to Kreschenta. Their age is different, yet their faces are similar. Of course there are slight differences, but the air about them is identical. You like her that much? Yes. Kreschenta pouted and looked up at Kreschenta unhappily. Absolutely not, Kreschenta said as she pressed a finger to Kreschenta's lips. Kreschenta looked stunned for a moment, then her lips relaxed into a smile as she happily stepped closer. Understood. I will never do anything to Wani-sama's favorite. Kreschenta, good girl. Ah. Kreschenta patted Kreschenta's head and Kreschenta seemed happy for a moment. But then Kreschenta hastily stepped away and caught Krish's hand. Wani-sama, you cannot do that. I am the princess. It would be bad if that was seen. Kreschenta placed her hands on her hips, pretending to be angry as she looked around. Luckily, nobody was looking at them. Kreschenta had hid herself behind Nora when she walked here, so most people on the balcony had not even realized that Kreschenta is here in the first place. But good girls that do as they are told should be patted on the head. And somehow, Kreschenta thought Kreschenta would like it. Kreschenta tilted her head at her own words. It was like Kreschenta could read Kreschenta's mind. Kreschenta can understand how Kreschenta thinks, what she likes, what she hates, everything. Kreschenta can kind of understand her, unlike other humans. When Kreschenta looked at Berry just now, she had been planning how to kill Berry. She wanted Kreschenta, but Kreschenta rejected her. So how should she deal with the obstacle? Killing Berry would be simplest and quite easy. Rules and regulations have to be followed to fit into society. But they do not matter if not found out and can be broken secretly to obtain something. That is also Krish's belief, so it is easy for her to understand. Kreschenta looked slightly happy when Kreschenta pressed a finger to her lips, and Kreschenta understands that feeling. So Kreschenta thought that she would also be happy to be patted on the head. For some reason, Kreschenta can understand Kreschenta's logic and emotions. She glanced towards Berry, wondering if this is empathy. But Berry did not notice Krish's gaze. She was watching Kreschenta with a tense expression. That is true, but I may be a child, but I am also a princess. Anyway, you cannot do that in the palace. Seriously, Wani-sama needs to understand your own position better. Kreschenta blushed and seemed happy as she stepped closer to Kreschenta again. You were abandoned. So I can understand that you are not aware of the situation, but it seems we need to catch up with each other. Catch up? Kreschenta smiled and answered Krish's question. We need to share what each of us has learnt with the other. We can learn faster if we teach each other what the other is lacking. It is already late today, so tomorrow I will visit Wani-sama. It would be dangerous to let Wani-sama wander around here. Kreschenta is going back to the estate with Master tomorrow morning though. Kreschenta wants to hurry home and cook, so she turned down the invitation. But Kreschenta drew even closer with an exasperated look. Wani-sama, invitation from royalty is usually absolute. A margrave would stay a few more days if I said I want to talk to Wani-sama. I see. Seems I will have to start from the fundamentals. Kreschenta puffed out her cheeks. Kreschenta poked her cheeks and pushed the air out. I just said you cannot do that. Kreschenta glared back, embarrassed, before sighing and then turning to Berry. Argan-sama, could I ask you to pass a message to the margrave in Wani-sama's place? Why, yes, your highness. Berry watched Kreschenta. Kreschenta's expressions are rich and rapidly changing, but her atmosphere really is similar. You like her that much? Kreschenta's eyes when she asked Kreschenta that were the same inhuman eyes that Kreschenta sometimes shows. Purple gemstones void of emotion. Krish's eyes are always like that when observing or calculating something. Those eyes were a little scary at first, but Berry has gotten used to them. It is who Kreschenta is, and Berry has accepted it as a lovable trait. But similar eyes from Kreschenta sent chills down Berry's spine. It felt like she was a frog under the glare of a snake. As if her life was at Kreschenta's whimsy. There is no need to be scared. I may lie to others, but I will not lie to Wani-sama. She would notice immediately, and unlike other people, it would be scary to make an enemy of Wani-sama. And the way she thinks is also similar to Kreschenta. Thought she wants Kreschenta as a sympathizer, she is also coldly analyzing Kreschenta. Kreschenta is calculating everything. What will happen if Kreschenta became an enemy? What to do in that case? She is thinking in terms of gains and losses, not sentiment. Berry could understand this from the long time she has spent with Kreschenta and felt uneasy. Chapter 37. The Heroic Epic A Maiden Wanted. The estate's entranceway. Bogan and Celine were kneeling to welcome Kreschenta. Since the princess is visiting, both of them are dressed in simplified dress uniform for military nobles. Riding pants with a cloth vest, quilted armor with a cloak. Kreschenta and Berry are wearing skirts, so they are not kneeling. Instead they bowed deeply at the waist and lowered their heads. Oh, please raise your heads. This is an anonymous visit. Yes, Your Highness. Right after an anonymous visit from Guildenstein, here is another one from Kreschenta. He had just been warned to stay away from politics. This situation is making Bogan's stomach hurt. Why has she come here? Berry had also seemed confused when she told him about this yesterday. I do not have any friends around my age, so I would like to get along with Kreschenta. Right, Kreschenta? Yes, Your Highness. Kreschenta nodded in satisfaction, but Celine glared at Kreschenta. Krish's explanation had been vague, as was Berry's. Their explanation that the princess had taken a liking to Kreschenta and will be coming over to play as a friend did not make sense. Berry had seemed troubled and asked Celine and Bogan to wait and see for a while, but in the end, they still do not know Kreschenta's true intentions. No matter how you looked at her, Kreschenta is not the type of person to easily make friends. In fact, she is hopelessly bad at it. It is quite hard to believe that when the princess just happened to talk to Kreschenta not only did not anger her, but even became friends. There is also the question of why Kreschenta showed up here instead of summoning Kreschenta to the palace. Celine looked closely at Kreschenta's face. A pretty fairy-like, adorable face. The princess's beauty is famous in high society, and she is just as beautiful as rumored. Her young, but perfect features looked somewhat similar to Kreschenta. The matching dresses with Kreschenta was beautiful, but you also look wonderful, dignified in dress uniform. It is an honor, Your Highness. I have heard about your and Krish's contributions. If there is a chance, I would like to hear more about it. It would be my delight. If you would like to, we could talk about it with Kreschenta now. Kreschenta looked like she was enjoying something as Celine replied with a smile. I have a promise with Kreschenta. Sorry, but not today. Please forgive me for my impertinence, Your Highness. It is fine, I was happy to hear it. Could you guide me to the room? Understood. Berry bowed her head. After watching the four of them go, including Nora silently following behind, Celine sighed. I don't get it. Why did the princess come? There was no response. She turned to Bogan, but he seemed lost in thought. Otu-sama? No, I just had a stupid thought. Well, as Berry said, let's wait and see. Berry is a smart girl. Indeed. I just hope Kreschenta does not do something stupid. In the end, that is Celine's main concern. Once they were in Krish's room, Kreschenta and Kreschenta sat on diagonally opposite sofas as Berry brewed tea for them. Kreschenta stared at her, then at Kreschenta, adding plenty of milk to her own tea. Kreschenta noticed her gaze and also added the same amount of milk to Kreschenta's tea. Kreschenta adds a large amount of milk to her tea to lower it to a more suitable temperature, but it is quite a lot more than what most people would add. Berry looked at Kreschenta in concern. Kreschenta looked embarrassed, but also seemed quite happy. She happily took a sip. Their preferences are the same too. Berry went to stand at her position as a servant as she discovered that similarity and watched them from an appropriate distance. Kreschenta's servant, Nora, also stood there without saying a word. For a while, Kreschenta asked Kreschenta various things about her past. About how Kreschenta was taken in by the village and raised by Grace and Gorka. How they were killed by bandits and how Kreschenta was forced to leave the village because she killed those bandits. How her grandfather left her in the care of his acquaintance and she was adopted. Kreschenta owes a lot to Berry, Celine, and Bogan, and she has not been able to repay that debt at all. She wants to return that debt as much as she can and likes her life in the estate. That is why she cannot join Kreschenta. Krish's explanation was dispassionate. She did not show her usual dependency on Berry, she did not even glance at Berry. Kreschenta was expressionless and she spoke matter-of-factly, but it looked to Berry like she is on guard. After Kreschenta was done with her questions, she stared at her tea for a while, thinking, "My visit is also to confirm something, since my uncle seems to have visited the day before yesterday. He might have spoken badly of me." The Margrave looked a little troubled, and without commenting on Krish's story, she started talking about something else. "This is the main topic." Berry mentally braced herself as she replied, "Is that so?" "Yes, I could see it." "Argansama, what are the Margrave's intentions?" "There is no way the princess." Kreschenta made the effort to visit them simply because of her stated reason of not letting Kreschenta wander around the castle. She had come to investigate the reason for the royal prince, Guildenstein's visit. She had visited to see Bogan's reaction. He is not a person that often talks about politics. But, the master is a true soldier that fights for the country, a person that disciplines and decides for himself. He always maintains a distance from politics. A true soldier, those are nice words. Despite what she said, Kreschenta looked dissatisfied. Pouting a little, she turned to Kreschenta. "If Wanisama is going to stay with the Margrave, I would have liked for him to be on my side." Kreschenta knows nothing about that. "You know that the palace is split into two factions, right? It is not good to always be on the back foot. Kreschenta wants to become king." Kreschenta put a hand to her brow when Kreschenta asked that with a puzzled look. "That way is safer. I am the same as Wanisama. I was in danger of being killed from the time I was born. As a cursed child. Same as Kreschenta? If not, I would be enjoying a fun life with Wanisama right now." "Wanisama, as a baby, you did not cry, right?" Kreschenta thought a little and nodded. "Yes. They gave Kreschenta food, so Kreschenta was satisfied. We think like that because we are different from normal people. Normally, babies just cry." Kreschenta's gaze turned to Nora. "I was able to cry and survive because Nora taught me how to, but it was still quite dangerous." "Right, Nora. My apologies. There is nothing for you to apologize for. Thanks to you, I was not killed and am able to meet Wanisama now." Nora silently ducked her head, tightly gripping her own skirt. "A baby that does not cry will bring calamity upon the royal family, or so the legends say. Something must have happened in the past. Because of that, Wanisama was confined in the tower with Nora in charge of you. Apparently Arokasama begged for your life." In contrast, Kreschenta is calm. She is only slightly past the age of 10, composed for her age. "Otusama hesitated and postponed the decision by confining Wanisama in the tower after Okasama got pregnant with me. He decided to dispose of you. Since there is going to be another child, he probably wanted to pretend you never existed." "Oh." Kreschenta always thought it was because Kreschenta spoke to Nora-san. "Fufu, that is not it. But it seems like Nora has always regretted it. After all, she abandoned Wanisama in the forest as a young child." Kreschenta looked at Nora. Nora trembled and looked down, hiding her face. A bead of sweat crawled down her cheek. "Please forgive me, I could not do anything else at the time." Kreschenta watched her, then glanced at Berry. Berry was looking at Nora with a sad expression. "I like Nora, but if Wanisama is angry, then I am willing to hand Nora over." "Do you want her?" Kreschenta's voice was flat, cold. "Hand Nora over," meaning Kreschenta can do anything she wants to Nora. But Kreschenta was not interested. Kreschenta is not particularly angry. Nora-san petted Krish's head a lot too. It is true Kreschenta got very hungry and almost died, but Kreschenta was taken in by the village anyway. Ah, this is fate. Kreschenta tiled her head. Kreschenta smiled and held up a finger. Kreschenta was abandoned by Nora-san and taken in by the village, then went to the Kristan's estate and is doted on by Berry and Celine. Kreschenta is very satisfied with the current situation, so Kreschenta is not angry. Fate. Yes. Krish might also be living in the palace if Kreschenta could pretend like Kreschenta. But if Kreschenta did that, then Kreschenta would not have such a fun life with Berry and Celine, so Kreschenta is satisfied with the current situation. Right, Berry. Berry smiled happily at those words, but Kreschenta pouted. So that is how it is for Wani-sama? Yes. Kreschenta is not having fun at all? Yes, not at all. Even if I am the princess, the fact that I was once called a cursed child does not change. I can never relax. I have to be careful of poison in my meals every day and pretend to be stupid enough to not raise suspicions. Wani-sama may be enjoying a carefree life, but it is different for me. Kreschenta puffed out her cheeks. Kreschenta is quite good at talking and showing expression. Kreschenta has done her best to improve in that aspect, but Kreschenta must have worked even harder. Kreschenta could understand that. She stood up, moved to sit beside Kreschenta and patted her head. What are you doing? Patting your head. That is not what I mean. Kreschenta blushed, looking at Berry and Nora, but did not say any more and let Kreschenta have her way. Kreschenta wants to relax. That is why Kreschenta wants to become king. Is there any other reason? No, just checking. Kreschenta did not really understand why Kreschenta needs Kreschenta. Kreschenta wants Krish's help so that Kreschenta can relax. Yes. In exchange, Kreschenta will also make it so that Wani-sama can relax. Kreschenta spoke as if that was obvious. Kreschenta calmly listened to her and smiled. She stroked Kreschenta's cheek. Kreschenta might be able to relax more by killing Kreschenta right now, and placed her hand on Kreschenta's neck. Kreschenta was still smiling as she calmly said that. Kreschenta is a lot stronger when it comes to fighting, but Kreschenta is better at talking and seems to have studied a lot, so Kreschenta could harass Kreschenta a lot. The words, the meaning behind them. There was no pretense, only innocent murderous intent. Her eyes were cold, as if watching a butterfly caught in her hand. They were lit only by a cold purple light. The princess's eyes were the same, an inhuman purple, looking back at Kreschenta. She knows that if Kreschenta wants to, Kreschenta could easily do it. If Kreschenta really wanted to kill her, she can only die. Resigned, she watched, she observed the person who held her life. Will you kill me? Gains and losses, if their interests do not match, that is the end. Though she came because there was a good chance of success, Kreschenta had also considered this outcome beforehand but still came. After a long silence, Kreschenta spoke with a troubled expression. Kreschenta seems like Kreschenta will do that if left alone, so Kreschenta thought about it a little. But killing the princess will also cause problems for Kreschenta, so it is very troublesome. A twisted conversation. Berry and Nora gulped as they listened. So Kreschenta had an idea. Kreschenta clasped Kreschenta's cheeks between her hands and said, Kreschenta can just come to the estate too. Why, Krish-sama. Berry spoke up hastily, but Kreschenta just glanced at her and tilted her head before looking back into Kreschenta's eyes and continuing. That way, Kreschenta does not have to worry about meals because Kreschenta and Berry will be making the meals. Kreschenta does not need to think that Kreschenta is weird. Kreschenta and Berry both sees it as a trait. Kreschenta stroked Kreschenta's cheeks and traced her lips. Kreschenta will pat Kreschenta's head. Kreschenta will hug Kreschenta and sleep together. Kreschenta just needs to do the same for Kreschenta. That way, both Kreschenta and Kreschenta are satisfied. Kreschenta said Kreschenta wants to be understood and that Kreschenta understands Kreschenta. Kreschenta was taught that a relationship where both try to understand each other and fulfill each other's wishes is a very happy and wonderful relationship. Kreschenta also believes that. Krish's hands slid down as she spoke, from Kreschenta's cheeks to her jaw, then coming to rest around Kreschenta's neck again. Her fingers traced the soft flesh there and toyed with it. Their faces were so close their noses were almost touching, But Kreschenta is also uneasy while Kreschenta still feels unpleasant. Kreschenta thinks it might be better to kill Kreschenta instead. Her purple eyes were cold and inhuman. But if Kreschenta no longer feels unpleasant, then both Kreschenta and Kreschenta can relax, right? That way Kreschenta can let Kreschenta relax and Kreschenta can do the same, right? Kreschenta looked stunned, staring at Kreschenta. She savored the feeling of the hands around her throat, then pouted again and glared at Kreschenta. I thought this yesterday, but Wani-sama is a little stupid. You are aware that I am the princess. Kreschenta is not stupid. Kreschenta just does not know anything about the palace and just thought about things simply. You don't like Krish's idea? I do not dislike it. Kreschenta drew closer and got onto Krish's lap. In that position, she hugged Kreschenta and smiled. But, yes, it is not that bad an idea. Wani-sama is telling me to enter the same birdcage, right? As long as the birdcage is a nice place where both Wani-sama and I can relax, it is fine. That way, we can work together to protect that birdcage. Birdcage. It is just a metaphor. Wani-sama really has poor conversation skills. Kreschenta giggled as Kreschenta blushed. We are the birds. The birdcage can be the palace or the estate. If I dote on the same birds in the same birdcage that Wani-sama dotes on, then Wani-sama will also be kind to me and protect me. And if anyone tries to do something to our birdcage, we can protect it together, right? Yes, something like that. Kreschenta can just use some reason like studying to come to the estate. It is very simple, right? Kreschenta nodded and rubbed her cheeks with Krish's, seeming to be enjoying herself. Yes, yes. The theory is very simple. There is any number of problems, but there is a good chance of success. If that is Wani-sama's intention, then I will also do my best for Wani-sama. Good girl. Kreschenta patted Kreschenta's head. Kreschenta has learnt that this is how you treat children. Kreschenta looked extremely happy and smiled as she ran a hand through Krish's hair, then narrowed her eyes. But I will need some time to prepare. As the princess, as someone fighting for the throne, it is not that simple to visit a Margrave. That, well, Kreschenta also understands that. The palace society is a little complicated and really troublesome, so I will deal with that first. What is Kreschenta going to do? Kreschenta looked at Kreschenta, then Berry. Please do not worry about that. Just some preparations to build a sturdy birdcage. A sturdy birdcage? I will explain when it is done, so rest assured. More importantly, Wani-sama, can I sleep in this position? Fufu, Kreschenta really is a child. Kreschenta said the words that are usually said to her and poked Kreschenta's cheeks when she puffed them out, forcing the air out. Puhu, Kreschenta blushed at the dumb sound she made. I wanted to try sleeping peacefully, just for once. I have never been able to relax and sleep. Whenever I sleep, I have to worry about being killed. Berry saw Kreschenta's expression and lowered her eyes. She is the same as Kreschenta. Their eyes are extremely inhuman but also sometimes reflective, like glass. They are aware that they are different from others, but still do their best to fit in and act as desired, simply seeking peace of mind and happiness. But this small Kreschenta is not even allowed simple sleep. Berry felt an indescribable emotion well up as she took the blanket from the bed and wrapped both of them in it. Sleeping like that would not be good for your body. Kreschenta looked confused for a moment, then her expression relaxed. Argan-sama is a kind person. I can see why Wani-sama took a liking to you, she said with those inhuman, purple eyes. The next day, they left the capital and returned the way they came. Kreschenta told Berry to stay quiet and only told Bogan on the way out that she wants to come over to the Kristan's estate to play. Berry hesitated a little on how she should explain things, but Bogan told her not to say anything if the princess had forbidden her, so she kept it to herself. And as if nothing had happened, they returned to the estate. Their journey was the same as before and they returned to their normal lives upon arriving at the estate. But a few days later, Bogan received a report that the king has passed away. The messenger said that it was not due to illness, it was clearly poison. And also that the princess has gone missing. Berry felt a chill run down her spine when she heard about it, but she did not let it show. But another few days later on a rainy night, Berry heard a knock, opened the door and froze when she saw the girl standing there. It has been half a month, Argansama. Her hair peeked out from her rain-soaked cloak. That hair shone an elegant gold with a tinge of red. The face peeking out from the cloak is young and similar to Kreschenta, beautiful fairy that beguiles people. The king had been assassinated. The princess, fearing her political enemy, the royal prince, sought safety with the loyal subject, Margrave Kreschenta, whom I got to know at the dinner party. After I confront the royal prince with Christ and with Wanisama and win, I obtain the crown and peace. Glistening drops of water dripped off her wet hair as she removed her hood. In the dark of night, she looked phantasmal. She did not feel real. Don't you think that is a good script? Wanisama does not need to leave the Kreschentas that she likes. I get to live with Wanisama and the masses will praise me and the Kreschentas. Her sweet, cold voice was quiet, but clear despite the sound of rain. I have studied quite a lot. In every age, the key to a stable rule is the support of the masses. The masses are usually docile, but it is always the stories that move them. I wrote this script based on a widespread and familiar story. Isn't it nice? Isn't this the heroic epic that everyone wants? Kreschenta smiled bewitchingly. Albaran year 457. The Great Civil War, known as the War for the Albaran Crown, began not long after the kingdom defended the invasion from the Elsren Holy Empire. The gravely ill King Shelbaza was assassinated. The first princess, Kreschenta, feared her political rival, the royal Prince Guildenstein, and sought safety with the hero of that time, Kreschenta. Guildenstein was infuriated. He claimed that it is all the princess's plot and asserted his right to the throne. He demanded that Kreschenta hand over the princess. But before Guildenstein could be crowned, the nobles against him, those of the princess faction, claimed that Guildenstein's faction had assassinated the king and they sided with Kreschenta. The princess faction was advantageous at that time and had no reason to assassinate the king. They loudly proclaimed Guildenstein to be an usurper of the throne. The confrontation grew more intense and could not longer be resolved through politics or words. The war for the Albaran crown broke out, splitting the kingdom into two. This is the beginning of the war as described in history books. End of Volume 2.